In a world where everyone lives humiliating themselves just to survive, one ordinary man decided he had enough. Hang Xingwang was an exploited employee, working like a dog every day just to pay for his sick mother's treatment. Until one day, he finally snapped. He told his boss and the entire company to go fuck themselves. And at that exact moment, he awakened the ultimate wantless, godly rich system. The more he lives without caring about anyone's opinion, the more he spends, shows off, the richer he becomes. This is the most insane and addictive system ever created. Get ready, because today you're going to watch his complete rise from zero to the absolute top. Let's begin. The protagonist went to his boss saying that he had a family emergency and knew the department was very busy, but he promised he would only need 2 days off and, when he came back, he would make up for all the work he had missed. His boss asked if he was really talking about taking leave, because recently the company's new short video department had been particularly understaffed. So, except under special circumstances such as weddings or funerals, no other leave requests were approved. The boss was just enjoying some videos on his phone. The protagonist became a little irritated and said that his mother was sick and hospitalized, and she needed someone to take care of her. So, he asked him to make an exception. The boss continued acting as if nothing affected him, and asked whether the protagonist's father was still alive and whether, if he was not free, perhaps there was another relative who could help. The boss questioned whether the protagonist really needed to do everything himself. Besides, it was just an illness, and he could only ask for leave if it was something critical. The girl he was watching thanked him for the rocket he had given her earlier. The protagonist felt powerless because of that. His boss emphasized that he could not climb the hierarchy without making sacrifices, because he himself had worked overtime even during his father's funeral, and that was how he had gotten to where he was today. Besides, he wanted to know why young people nowadays were so delicate. Everyone wanted time off for illness, weddings, and relatives. If everyone took leave, how would the company be able to operate? The boss emphasized that, in the new media industry, opportunity was crucial. If the protagonist was not there, and someone delivered news about a video, who would take responsibility for the loss? For that reason, he should not ruin the performance of the entire department because of one person. The protagonist pointed out that he could work from home and stay focused on contact the entire time. The boss said he was already tired of trying to persuade the protagonist and that if he really wanted an easy life, he could simply resign. That way, he could settle his accounts, spend as much time as possible with his parents, and remain immature forever, just as he wanted. He stood up and said that he would be very clear with the protagonist because he was just someone who had graduated from a third-rate university and had only managed to get a job at the biggest media company in the city because the company urgently needed people and made an exception to hire him. Therefore, he should know that the least qualified people in that company came from top-tier universities, not to mention someone incredible like himself, who was bilingual. So he would tell the protagonist one more time not to be ungrateful and not to waste this opportunity by always trying to relax and avoid work. Trends would not wait for him, and neither would that position, so he could think about it if he still wanted to leave. Xingwang went to a table and started smoking a cigarette while thinking about life. Suddenly, his phone began to ring, and as soon as he answered, his father asked if he had time to come back. Suddenly, a nurse approached his father and asked when his wife's medical fees would be settled, because they had already been flexible enough so far, but with further delays, it would be difficult for them. The protagonist's father became worried and desperate, saying that he would resolve it in a few days. But the nurse pointed out that he had said the same thing a few days earlier, and that, if it was not resolved this time, the patient would have to be discharged. The protagonist's father said he understood. The protagonist, who had been listening to everything, was surprised, and his father apologized, saying he had been busy, then asked what he had said. Xingwang knew very well what he needed to do and told his father that he would return in a few days and cover the medical expenses. His father told him not to worry because he had already borrowed money from relatives and friends, and his mother had medical insurance, which would cover quite a lot. But the protagonist insisted, saying that he would cover what was missing and that his father did not need to borrow from relatives or worry too much about the situation, because he would solve everything. His father remained worried, saying that the protagonist had only graduated recently, and that the cost of living in Sang City was very high, so what savings could he possibly have? His father told him not to suffer because of this and not to take out risky loans, because if he really could not come back, it was fine, and he did not need to push himself too hard. The protagonist remained firm in his decision and told his father that it was fine because he had money, then hung up the phone. He looked at his bank account and thought that he had been working for a year and a half, and although his monthly salary was only 5,000, he saved a lot by sharing a bunk bed with other people. Besides, he only spent 10 yuan on takeout food and sometimes earned some extra money editing videos, so he had managed to save 50,000. He took a deep breath and thought that this amount should cover his mother's medical expenses, at least for a while. He had lived for more than 20 years and had never done anything out of line, but today he needed to make a decision against his ancestral values. There were many job opportunities, but his parents could not wait for that, so he was resigning because staying in such an inhuman company was horrible. He went to HR and 20 minutes later, he was officially unemployed. However, he became worried, thinking that in this job market and economic climate, he had still dared to resign without another job lined up, and that he really was being reckless, but there was not much he could do. Suddenly, a system screen appeared saying that the Ultimate Freedom System had been activated because the host had made a decision against the will of his ancestors by abandoning his job, and the reward for that was 88,888 yuan. Xingwang was surprised, asking what that was, and questioned who was watching videos so loudly on their phone because it was buzzing inside his brain. However, the same sound from before and the screen appeared again, calling the protagonist Master and asking him to check his reward money, because now he could freely satisfy himself. The more he satisfied himself, the more money he would have, and for that reason, he needed to keep going. Xingwang still did not understand anything, asking what that interface appearing right in front of him was. Suddenly, his phone vibrated, and as soon as he looked at the notification, he saw that it said his savings card ending in 5,910 had received a deposit of 88,888 yuan on January 20th, 2024, and that his current balance was 138,888.80 yuan. This was so surprising that the protagonist thought it might be some kind of scam. He was shocked by his new balance, and the system appeared again, telling him not to doubt it because he had awakened the system so he could start enjoying himself. The protagonist thought that if he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not believe it, because it was truly hard to believe that something like this was happening to him. He continued looking at his phone while questioning whether he had really awakened a system. The system was called the Ultimate Freedom System, and apparently he had activated it by resigning from his job. After analyzing it for a while, he thought that maybe he had gotten the hang of how to use that system, and that now he needed to find a good opportunity. Suddenly, a girl dressed in a well-behaved outfit approached the protagonist and asked what he was thinking about. She was Gao Wen, a contracted blogger and dancer with 8 million fans across all platforms. She asked the protagonist if he had already prepared the script for her next live stream. The protagonist tried to speak to her, but she came even closer, asking if he had managed to do it. But he was so lost in some things that he asked what she had just asked. She kept smiling and touched his face, saying that he seemed very distracted and that apparently he had finally opened his eyes to his older sister. Xingwang, a little embarrassed, said that apparently she still liked to keep joking about these things. She lay on top of him, saying that she had been going to ask him to get a few more scripts for her, because recently the followers who paid the most had relaxed, and the recharge flow had decreased slightly. The protagonist thought that the girl in front of him was the main female internet celebrity whose scripts he used to manage. On the internet, she was known as the sexiest dance goddess. But offline, in what would be considered real life, she was a friendly person and not arrogant at all, and both her flaw and her strength were that she loved teasing people. Xingwang apologized to her and explained that he had just resigned and would no longer be responsible for influencer scripts, and that the company would arrange a transfer. Gao Wen was a little shocked and asked why this had happened so suddenly. The protagonist continued packing his things while thinking that, although he knew that this girl did not look down on others, she still only gave him extra glances, because she knew he was familiar with influencer scripts and was the easiest and most accessible person for her. So, probably, after resigning, each of them would go their separate ways and there was not much that could be done. Xingwang smiled, thinking that his mind was clear now. Gao Wen went up to him again and, with an alluring look, asked if he really wanted to resign since she still greatly preferred the work he did and did not trust anyone else in that place. The protagonist explained that, unfortunately, he had already completed all the procedures. He thought that she was very close and needed to have some awareness, because if she got any closer, maybe he would not be able to control himself so well. Gao Wen also noticed that something was different and questioned herself as to why the protagonist had been acting so strangely lately, because before, whenever she acted cute, he would joke back with her. She continued trying to appeal to his sentimental side, asking if he was really going to leave her alone. She thought that this resignation had happened too suddenly and that something had probably happened. However, the protagonist thought that she was only being nice to him because she could see profit coming from him, so he needed to stay firm and not deceive himself. He explained to her that he wanted to give himself an extended vacation. Gao Wen threw herself into his arms and asked which company he was planning to go to, because maybe they would become competitors and her operations would be taken over by someone else, and who knew how long it would take her to get used to those other people. Xingwang began to feel his masculine instincts going out of control and thought that this was getting very exciting, and that way things would become a little complicated for him. However, he thought that with the system, he could easily become a billionaire, so he would be able to have any kind of beauty once that happened. This woman in front of him seemed to have worked very hard for this. He looked at her and said that maybe she needed to get some cosmetic maintenance done on her nose because it looked a little crooked. As soon as she heard this, she became embarrassed and asked if it was really crooked, grabbing a mirror and almost crying, thinking how that could be true because it was impossible. As soon as she looked in the mirror, she thought that indeed it seemed a little crooked, and the live stream was about to begin, so she needed to fix it as quickly as possible. The system appeared again, saying that this was incredible because the host had truly refused to be a beauty's little dog, expressing his true thoughts without hiding them, and that was very bold. For that reason, he had fulfilled the requirements of being sincere and open-minded, and his reward was 23,333. His phone received another notification. He looked at the deposit again, and now his balance had gone up to 162,221. He smiled, thinking that apparently this was what ultimate freedom meant. He just had to be himself and refuse to be a simp controlled by anyone else. That was the official rule of that system. Gao Wen thanked the protagonist for reminding her about her nose because she had not noticed it. She said that he had already emphasized that he had decided to resign, so she would not keep him there anymore because they would still have many opportunities in the future to work together. So, she would like to wish him a bright future. This made the protagonist surprised because he thought she should be furious after he talked about her nose, so why was she so calm? This left him confused, questioning whether she was pretending or being sincere. Gao Wen continued saying that she was saying this because they had been colleagues, and the protagonist had taken very good care of her for a long time, so today she would like to offer him a farewell dinner. And if he had trouble finding a job, he could just send her a message, because she knew some people in the industry. His skills were exceptional, and he would not struggle to find new opportunities. Xingwang thought that she probably knew about his poor academic background, and was worried that he would not find another job. So maybe her earlier words had not just been empty talk, and apparently she was indeed a kind and nice person. The protagonist decided to be kind as well and said that he was the one who should be offering her a farewell dinner, so how could he let her pay for it? But Gao Wen said that his salary was not that high and that he should save as much as he could. Xingwang said that he was the one leaving, so they did not need to be stingy this time. As she herself had said, they might work together in the future, so she could consider it his thanks for the help she was giving him. Gao Wen smiled and said that he was about to leave, and only now did she realize that she did not know him very well. The protagonist said goodbye, saying that he needed to take care of a few things, so he would go first, and as soon as she got off work, he would contact her. Already outside in the middle of the street, he began walking, thinking that previously he would have walked on foot. If possible, he would use public transportation, and if that still was not an option, he would avoid unnecessary fees. He would only take a taxi with other people when public transportation stopped running after 11 at night. Even taking a taxi was a luxury in his daily life, but today he could afford to choose the most expensive option, and he was going to enjoy it properly. He ordered the best ride-hailing car, and a car quickly stopped in front of him. The driver got out, saying that this was the Dida luxury ride, and very respectfully asked him to get into the car. Xingwang was surprised and thought that this was expected of a luxury car because it had arrived in less than 3 minutes. Those lines were smooth, and the sound of the engine warmed his heart. He remembered that before he would get depressed because it was already too late to find someone to split a taxi with him, and now he would probably have to walk home at midnight. But now what had happened to him was indeed a leap in social class, and today he was a different person. The driver got out of the car and opened the door for the protagonist, politely asking him to get in. The system appeared, saying that the user was feeling generous, paying for a taxi without even looking at the prices. Freely satisfying himself was what he needed to do, and the reward was 50,000. The driver asked the protagonist, just to confirm the itinerary, if he was going to Baoxing Street. Xingwang said yes and asked the driver to stop at the Laoxi pancake shop. The driver accelerated the car, saying that he would do everything perfectly. Meanwhile, the protagonist simply enjoyed the ride, thinking that the luxurious seat was something exceptional. A short while later, Xingwang arrived at his destination. The woman saw the protagonist and asked if he wanted the usual, a pancake without eggs and sausage. Xingwang said not this time because he wanted 2 extra eggs and 2 whole sausages. He thought that when his monthly salary was only 5,000, he spent 800 on rent and could not spend more than 20 on his daily meals. A basic pancake was 8 won, and he had never dared to add an egg. But today he did not care at all, and spending 15 on a single meal did not matter, because he had made it, leveled up, and could now spend 15 on one meal. Because not only was he able to add 2 eggs and put in 2 whole sausages, even he himself was feeling envious of him. The people around him were impressed when they saw that indeed he was spending more than usual. Some people were even envious, wondering when they would be able to show off like that. The system appeared saying that it was shocked because the user had not only added 2 eggs, but also added sausages to the pancake. A great leap in living standards, fully satisfying himself, and the reward was 20,000. While enjoying his pancake, he thought that this was an incredible afternoon. The satisfaction of having a big meal was indescribable, and next time he would add 5 eggs. Back when he was struggling, he had been so poor that he could not even entertain himself. And after he started working, he lacked both money and time. So what normal people did for fun was a mystery. While walking, he saw a company called K18. He found it strange how he could have forgotten, because now he had plenty of money and could go to the mall. Besides, he still needed to pay for a dinner with Gao Wen, and he had heard that expensive restaurants had dress codes. His current outfit was below standard, and now it was time to go shopping. He saw a designer store and was surprised, thinking that this was a big mall and was filled with the smell of oranges. But he did not know why the names of all the brands were in English, and he could not understand anything. He continued looking around, and a mall as big as that did not have the brands he was used to wearing. However, he stopped and thought that he still had the same poor man's mindset from before, and he should stop that once and for all. As soon as he entered a store, one of the receptionists said that a customer had just come in, but the other asked her friend to attend to him because she was busy. The receptionist who said she was busy looked at the protagonist and saw that he did not have a proper haircut, was wearing a bunch of trash, the style of his clothes was outdated, and his phone was not worth more than 500. Good bargain shoppers from street stores. His sneakers were also from a street store and were deformed from use. Because of that, none of the women went over to assist him, and the protagonist asked if no one was going to help him. He thought that although he did indeed look poor, the amount of snobs inside that place was far too obvious. To teach them a lesson, he pointed out that he was tired from work and had not had time to do any research, but he wanted to buy something that cost 150,000. However, since they were wasting his time, he would go to another store right next door. The attendants were surprised by this and rushed over to him, asking if he was looking for clothes or bags. Some of them even asked him to sit down and have some tea because they would bring the items for him to take a look. Xingwang thought that money definitely always spoke the loudest. After he finished shopping, the attendant said that he would always be welcome at any time. The protagonist thought that the service for rich people in luxury stores really was first class because he did not even need to carry his bags, since someone helped take them for him. The woman who was helping him called out to the protagonist and said that if he had time, he would be welcome to attend the jewelry appreciation event at the end of that month. Xingwang thanked her for the invitation and said that if he had time, he would come by to take a look. She smiled and asked if he would like all those items sent to his residence. Xingwang picked up his bags and said that there was no need because he liked doing his own things himself. The saleswoman continued smiling and told him to have a great day. As he was walking, he noticed 2 women talking. One of them said that there were designer stores in Longa Plaza and that if she wanted to take a look, she just had to go there. The other girl said that everything there was too expensive and that she could not afford it. Only Sister Hu was worthy of those items, and they did not even dare to buy luxury items in a boutique because they could only buy things through agents. The protagonist looked at his bag and thought that it was indeed very expensive. The system appeared again, completely impressed, because the user had spent 3 years' salary all at once and completed the achievement of spending his first large sum. Although it had been very flashy, it was still satisfying, and the reward for that was 660,000 since he was incredible. Xingwang realized that the more he spent, the more money he could earn, and now he was a little closer to becoming a millionaire, so he needed to work a little harder. That night, at the exotic Western restaurant, Xingwang appeared glamorous and dazzling. An attendant came up to him, saying that she would take him to his reserved private room. Xingwang smiled, saying that apparently he had arrived very early. The woman explained that the VIP room was a separate area where he could rest, enjoy some desserts, and wait for his friends. Xingwang thought that it was very obvious, because clothes made the man. In the past, he had never enjoyed such treatment in that kind of place. A short while later, the woman said that the separate area was right there and that the desserts and teas were on the table so he could help himself as much as he wanted. Besides, if he needed anything, he just had to ring the bell and someone would come to serve him. She began to leave, saying that she would not disturb his rest so he could fully enjoy his meal. Xingwang went to the window and thought that seeing the Pearl of Song City from the 40th floor was a view he had never had before. As long as a person had money, they could enjoy the best services in life. With enough money, he could reach heights others could not. Those fantasies he had held in his mind for so long had now finally become reality. But first, he needed to send some money to his father. However, he did not want to shock him too much, so he would transfer only 100,000. Maybe he just needed to say that he had worked part-time, and he and his mother should not be confused or surprised by it. Meanwhile, Gao Wen was still in her live stream saying that if everyone thought her dancing was good, then they could send her a few more rockets. Besides, everyone was missing her #1 fan because he used to send several rockets, and it was time for him to show his dominance. Meanwhile, the protagonist was sitting in the VIP area waiting, thinking that he had sent the location and the name of the restaurant to her. But since she had not replied yet, she was probably doing a live stream. Gao Wen thanked her #1 fan for the rockets and said that this was the end of today's broadcast. As soon as the broadcast ended, she sat down in the chair exhausted, and her friends asked what she was going to eat that night. Gao Wen explained that she already had plans for that night. Jinuo asked if something was going on and who her sugar daddy was. But Gao Wen told Jinuo to stop talking nonsense because they knew the person she was going to meet since his name was Xing Wang. The other girl pointed out that apparently Gao Wen still had not forgotten that boy, because even after he had left that job, she continued talking about him the same way she had before. Shinuo questioned whether something was happening between the two of them. Gao Wen told them not to imagine things, because the protagonist had helped her a lot when he was her operations manager. Besides, he had resigned, so it was only fair for them to have a meal together because he had been very considerate toward her. The blonde girl said that she would like to go along as well. Gao Wen said that was fine and that she could come. Besides, she emphasized that they should eat something normal. But if the protagonist was very considerate, and it ended up being something expensive, they themselves needed to pay, because they could think of it as a group dinner. That was fine because she was very tired after a long day of work and this was a reward for herself. She asked if Sinuo was also coming along. Zinuo said yes because they should not take advantage of other people, but the truth was that she was thinking that with Xingwang's poor appearance, he ate Jianbing without adding eggs. So what expensive restaurant could he possibly afford? Gao Wen said that first, she needed to remove her makeup and she would meet them later in the parking lot. A short while later, the three of them went to the parking lot. She picked up her key and said that they were lucky because cars were not restricted today, so they could use her car. The blonde girl pointed out that it was becoming harder and harder to get good contracts recently. Because of that, she did not know when she would be able to buy a car like hers. Gao Wen asked why she did not try becoming a dance streamer, but the girl said that it was too tiring and that she did not want to waste her breath dancing from morning until night, because if she could find a soft-hearted fan to take her abroad, everything would be fine. Her name was Zhan Qingting. Shinwo thought that she was overthinking it because, in their line of work, it was already good enough not to be used and sleep with sponsors for free, and yet she was still talking about being taken abroad. Qingting asked if people were not allowed to dream about that. Jinuo said that it was fine and that she could keep dreaming as much as she wanted. But Jinuo thought that Gao Wen had not managed to buy a luxury car just through dancing, because no one knew how many fans she had really slept with. Otherwise, with her appearance, how could she be the company's top one? She asked where they were going to eat. Gao Wen asked her to wait a moment because she was going to check the location the protagonist had sent, but as soon as she looked, she was surprised. And Shinuo thought that maybe it was so cheap that she could not even bring herself to say it. Gao Wen said that it was Ling Wei. Qingting asked if it was some other restaurant with the same name, but Gao Wen explained that it was the one in the Qingtian building. It was that super famous restaurant with 3 Michelin stars. That place cost at least 3,000 per person and was very difficult to reserve. Qingting was surprised and questioned whether she was sure and had not made a mistake, because if that was right, it meant the protagonist had become successful and rich, and that was why he had resigned. Shinwo pointed out that maybe it was just in the same building and that it was indeed in the Qingtian building. Some people liked looking for nearby places to show off and confuse others, but Gao Wen told her not to judge people so quickly, because he was not that kind of vain person who liked to show off without having anything. Jinuo said that she agreed and that Xingwang was indeed not like that. But what she was really thinking was whether he could afford it or whether he would end up being slapped in the face. The three of them got into the car, saying that first, they needed to go there and see where it really was. Qingting praised the car, saying that the Audi was very stable and had good shock absorption, because her Mini Cooper shook a lot. Jinu said that Qingting had some very rich donors in her stream, so even if she was just a pretty blogger, maybe she could get some of those resources. After all, she only needed to do a few things, like pull her shirt down a little and make her voice a little softer. She continued saying that it did not matter whether Qingting was beautiful or a dance blogger. As long as she lowered her standards a little, those rich donors would send her a bunch of rockets, and then she could worry less about ads. Jingxing asked her to stop it because her audience was mostly female. Sinuo changed the subject, asking who would really want to show themselves off like that if they could earn clean money. If a rich guy really wanted to marry her, she would become a housewife immediately without thinking twice. She noticed that Gao Wen was silent and asked why she was not saying anything, questioning whether it was because she considered that attitude beneath her. Gao Wen explained that she thought being with someone because of excitement was dangerous, because if she could not be financially independent, she would become hostage to that person and would have no way to speak, complain, or demand anything. And in the end, just as his money was able to win her over, it would also be able to win over other people. As long as they had money, men could be surrounded by young women, and she did not want to stay alert all the time to see whether she was being cheated on. Zinuo said that Gao Wen was just being a killjoy and questioned whether she really thought that way. She thought that this girl needed to stop acting superior because her dances during live streams were more provocative than anyone else's. Gao Wen emphasized that she really only wanted to be self-sufficient and live her own way because she wanted to earn as much money as she could while she still could, since love had never paid the bills and money had never betrayed anyone. A short while later, they arrived at the parking lot. Qingqing said that even if Gao Wen made a good profit from her live streams, she still would not be able to pay for 3 people, and maybe the protagonist had sent the wrong address. Jinuo agreed, saying that Gao Wen should confirm it, because it would be embarrassing to enter an expensive restaurant and then leave because they did not have a reservation. And because of that, they might end up losing some followers if someone recognized them and filmed that embarrassment. Gao Wen said it was fine and decided to call him. Xingwang took a while to answer, and Xinuo asked if he still had not replied, thinking that it was all Gao Wen's fault for being close to someone who liked to show off. Gao Wen said that maybe the protagonist was a little busy. Xinuo laughed and said that it was true, maybe he was busy and had not been able to answer his phone, and that he would not ignore them just to mess with them so they could go there first. But she was thinking that since they were already there, she wanted to see the top one being made a fool of. Gao Wen entered the elevator and said that they were right and needed to go up. She thought that the place was very expensive and that, although she could not afford the things there, she also wanted to know Xingwang's salary level, because he was usually very frugal. That would be a very big expense for him, which made her wonder whether he was playing with her or not, because if that was the case, then she would have to deal with all of it. As soon as the elevator reached the floor, she became a little hesitant to step out and looked at her phone, trying to call the protagonist again. Suddenly, the receptionist went up to them and asked if they had a reservation. Gao Wen was a little hesitant to answer, but Jinuo said yes. Gao Wen, seeing that there was no way back now, said that the reservation was probably under Xingwang's name. Jinuo thought that the protagonist only had an operator position at the company and only received a salary of 5,000. A meal there should cost at least around 3 times Xingwang's salary, and now she wanted to see how the number one would handle that situation. The receptionist smiled and asked the 3 of them to follow her, because Mr. Xingwang had been waiting for them for quite some time. Xinuo was impressed and questioned whether that was really serious. As the 3 of them walked through the place, Zinuo only looked around with envy, thinking that Gao Wen really was very lucky because the company gave her resources, and she firmly occupied the number 1 position, leaving Zinuo in second place. Besides, she had all kinds of losers trying to win her attention, but now the protagonist was probably aiming too high, and he might end up losing both his money and the girl since she probably did not like someone who merely pretended to be rich. The receptionist took the 3 of them into an elevator and asked them to enter. She pressed the 40th floor, and Qingting emphasized that she was now really worried it might be someone with the same name, because they should ask to make sure, since it would be very embarrassing if they had misunderstood something. Gao Wen questioned what she was talking about. Qingting explained that this elevator was exclusive for VIP customers to access the rooms with the best view, and the minimum spending requirement should be at least 10,000. Zinuo thought that it was probably someone with the same name because that would be more than 3 months' salary, and if the protagonist gritted his teeth and did not drink anything, then maybe he had saved it all up. But even if it was indeed him, the 3 of them were there together, and the expense would be enormous for 4 people, so he probably would not be able to handle it. Besides, maybe he was very clever and had seen that someone with the same name had made a reservation, and now he was just trying to put on a show. The more he boasted, the more likely he was to end up being exposed. The receptionist opened the door and politely asked the 3 of them to enter and sit down. But as soon as they entered, they realized that the protagonist was not there. Qingting seized the opportunity and said that they were in an excellent place, so they should take the chance to snap some photos. She asked if they really were not going to take advantage of this opportunity, because they had said they could not take photos at reception, only in the private rooms. And regardless of whether they ended up eating or not, if she took some photos, then she would consider that she had done the right thing, because she could post them on social media and no one would know whether she had gone in just to take a look or had really gone there to eat. Zinuo sat there a little irritated, saying that they could take their own photos by themselves, while thinking that the protagonist had invited them and was not there. But that was to be expected. Qingting continued being impressed by everything, because she had never dined in such an expensive restaurant in her life. So who knew when she would have the chance to come back there again? Zinuo remained in a bad mood and asked her friend if anyone had replied, because she did not want to be made a fool of if this was just a misunderstanding. The receptionist went to the waiting room and knocked on the door, asking if the protagonist was awake, because the guests had just arrived. Gao Wen, also a little suspicious of everything, said that maybe they really had mistaken him for someone else. Xingwang was just an ordinary office worker and had no way of having the money to dine in that place. Shinuo thought that she had known all of that already. But suddenly, the protagonist opened the door and apologized, saying that he had fallen asleep. He emphasized that he had woken up on the fourth missed call and that the girls had waited for a long time. He asked the waitress to start serving the dishes. Gao Wen looked at him and immediately got ready not to lose. Qing Ting was also impressed, asking if he really was the same protagonist because he was wearing a bunch of designer clothes. That jacket alone cost more than 40,000, and she had seen Liang wearing one. Jinwoo thought that this was indeed the entire recent collection Louis Vuitton had produced, and maybe the protagonist was a hidden second-generation rich kid. This made her even more envious of Gao Wen, questioning when she had become so lucky because she had silently hooked a second-generation rich kid. Gao Wen told Xingwang not to worry because they had also just arrived. The protagonist looked at Qing Ting and was happy to see that she was there too, remembering her name. But he could not remember Zinuo's. She introduced herself, saying that her name was Chu Shinuo. The protagonist apologized, saying that he had just woken up and was a little confused, and besides, she looked a little different without the beauty filter. Zinuo smiled and said it was fine because her makeup was very light today, but in truth, she became a little irritated by that situation. Gao Wen explained that she was leaving work and had run into her two colleagues who also wanted to come there. She emphasized that she had thought the protagonist might mind it, so they could. But before she could finish speaking, the waiters arrived bringing all the dishes, saying that they should enjoy their meal. As soon as the drinks and food were served, Gao Wen became worried because the price of this was very high and they would not even be able to split the bill. So what was the protagonist doing? There was no reason for him to do all of this. Qing Ting was impressed, saying that there was a second-generation rich kid among them, and he had probably resigned from work to return to his family's company. Gao Wen said that she also did not know exactly what was going on there. Xingwang was a little confused by that situation, thinking how anyone would want to eat that because those were just leftovers, even if they looked pretty. Qing Ting asked if he minded if she took a few photos first. Xingwang said no, and that she could feel free to do whatever she wanted inside. While she took some photos, Zinuo asked her friend what was really going on, questioning whether she was thinking of keeping them in the dark. Gao Wen apologized but said that she also did not know exactly what was going on there. She explained that the two of them were not very close, and that, aside from work relations, they had not had much personal contact. The few marketing campaigns he had arranged for her had been very effective, and she was very grateful for that. She thought that maybe the protagonist was a low-profile and pragmatic heir, and that, this time, he probably did not want a girl to pay for the food and decided to reveal his wealth. He asked the waitress if there was nothing more down to earth. Qing Ting thanked the protagonist, saying that he really was very bold because the last time someone paid for a meal for her that cost more than 10,000 per person, she still had not been satisfied since she had only accepted because the photos would make her look like a socialite on social media. The waitress asked the protagonist what he thought of ribs with black truffles covered in salmon roe sauce. She continued explaining the other dishes, and finally she said that they also had Alaskan king crab, and the largest one they had was around 20 kilos. But if the protagonist wanted, she could ask the chef to customize it for them. The protagonist was a little disappointed, saying that just hearing the names already killed his appetite because it was too boring and he wanted something a little more intense, not anything slow-cooked. For that reason, he wanted her to bring more crabs, imported steaks, and sliced lamb. Qing Ting screamed in amazement, saying that this was the first time she had ever seen someone order like that in a high-class restaurant, and that it was truly enlightening. Shinua pointed out that if he wanted to eat that, then there was no need to go to a French restaurant. This made her wonder whether the protagonist was really an heir, because he looked more like a nouveau riche, or maybe even an imposter. The protagonist continued with his somewhat unusual requests, asking if they had grilled kidneys and barbecue skewers because he really wanted to eat them. The waitress was a little startled and said that, unfortunately, they could only prepare the items on the menu and did not have those items, apologizing for it. Xing asked if she could call the manager because he wanted to discuss it a little since he was not satisfied with today's menu. The waitress said that was fine and asked him to wait just a moment, but she was surprised, wondering whether that gentleman was really serious. A short while later, the manager came in and greeted everyone, saying that he was the manager of that establishment. He emphasized that he was deeply sorry, but they were a French restaurant, so they only served French cuisine. Zinuo thought that the protagonist was a complete idiot because this was a French restaurant and it was obvious that the request would be refused. However, he thought that wanting barbecue in a French restaurant was very simple. Xing shouted, saying that he would pay 300,000 for the meal from now on, but he wanted the grilled kidneys and barbecue skewers, and if the manager could get them, he would give him another 50,000 tip. Upon hearing 300,000, the manager was impressed, and so were the three girls. Without thinking twice, the manager agreed to the request and asked what doneness he preferred for the meat. Xing said that he would reward him with the largest beef sashimi to celebrate his change in attitude, though he still preferred his defiant look from before. The manager felt confident and asked the protagonist to sit down because he would instruct the kitchen immediately. The system appeared, saying that the host was in a high-end French restaurant and had acted tough, disrespecting table etiquette and making the restaurant change its own rules and give up on cuisine. The reward for that was 500,000, and the system emphasized that it hoped the host would keep trying and wished him good luck. Xing thought that this system really was exceptional. He smiled and told all the girls at the table that dinner should be about relaxing and eating whatever they wanted, asking if they did not agree. Ting raised her hand and shouted that she agreed, thinking that taking photos of skewers in a high-class French restaurant might be even more interesting for her social media. A short while later, the new food the protagonist had ordered was served at the table. Ting was impressed, seeing that money really did speak, and that, with money, people could do whatever they wanted. She picked up her phone to take pictures because no one would believe that she had eaten barbecue in a 3-Michelin-star French restaurant on the top floor of Qingtian Tower, the tallest building in Beijing. As soon as all the food was served, the protagonist asked if all the ladies present would like to join him for dinner. After eating, Xing wiped his mouth and excused himself, saying that he needed to go to the bathroom. After he left the table, Ting pointed out that the clothes the protagonist was wearing must cost around 150,000, and together with the dinner expenses, he was definitely a second-generation heir. And for someone like him, working at that company meant only one thing. She said that maybe Xing liked Gao Wen and had stayed there just to get a little closer to her. Gao Wen became embarrassed and said that she did not have that much charm, and maybe he simply had not wanted to expose himself too much while working. But now that he was about to leave, he simply did not care anymore. Ting agreed, saying that some second-generation heirs just liked experiencing a little of ordinary life. Xinuo asked if Gao Wen really was not touched at all and whether she did not like the protagonist. Ting said that an extremely rich and generous guy spending a fortune on dinner with her was quite romantic, if they thought about it. Xinuo pointed out that Gao Wen seemed surprisingly calm and asked whether she had already known about the protagonist's wealth, because it was not fair to keep that news from all of them. And now it made perfect sense that she had said she was not interested in that big donor because she had already set her eyes on a much bigger fish. So she had made fools of her sisters all that time. Gao Wen continued eating while explaining that she really had not known because they were not close, so how could she have feelings for him? But her legs were already trembling as she continued saying that honestly she had not had any private interactions with the protagonist and had no idea how rich he was until tonight, since he had always been very ethical at the company and had always been modest. He was ambitious, worked hard, and often stayed late doing overtime. He seemed like any other dedicated and ordinary employee. Sinuo said that was fine and that she would reluctantly accept that explanation. However, she asked whether it was possible that the protagonist was only pretending because, nowadays, many people pretended to be rich to impress girls. They treated them to expensive dinners, luxury cars, and designer clothes. And some even maxed out their credit cards to keep up the act. After all, they themselves had heard many stories of some big donors doing the same thing, and it was possible that the protagonist might be that kind of person. Ting said that, now that she had mentioned it, she was starting to wonder whether the protagonist had actually been pretending to be poor all this time, because if that was the case, then they should applaud his acting skills. Sunuo explained that it would be very difficult to verify whether he came from a rich family, so there were other ways to confirm it and asked whether they should investigate a little further. Gao Wen questioned whether that was really necessary because it seemed a little too intrusive. After all, he was already paying for that expensive dinner for all of them, and doubting whether he was a fraud or not did not seem right. Zinuo thought that Gao Wen was just pretending to be innocent. She told her friend not to underestimate her own value because she was a popular streamer, and he had a lot to gain by getting close to her. So spending a few $100,000 to win her devotion might be worth it for some people. That was exactly how manipulative people operated. They attracted their prey and made them feel special until they were emotionally involved. When that happened, only then would they reveal their true faces. And if that was the case, the protagonist was a dangerous person. Gao Wen emphasized that she had no intention of developing feelings for Xingwang because of this. Zinuo explained that they did not need to continue that conversation because Gao Wen just needed to do exactly what she told her to do when they were about to verify the protagonist's true status, since they were all friends there and cared about each other. A short while later, they went to the parking lot and Gao Wen looked at the protagonist, thinking that if he really was pretending, she needed to cover today's expenses, even though she hoped that was not the case. After all, there was nothing wrong with living a simple and honest life. Qingting said that she was very curious and asked whether Xingwang was dating anyone. He said that unfortunately he was not because he had been single since birth, a genuine lone wolf in the romance department. Qingting was surprised and asked if he was serious. The protagonist explained that he had been so focused on his career that he had not even had time to think about it. He thought that being an office worker was quite exhausting, but at least it came with a good salary. Becoming a love-struck fool after work did not seem like a very good thing because that would be too miserable, and he certainly was not foolish enough to put himself in such a position. Zinuo said that it was still 9 o'clock at night and asked what they thought about continuing this at a bar. Although she was not as rich as the protagonist, they could still pay for a few drinks. She suggested going to a bar called Bar Fuge because she was a regular customer there and the atmosphere was very good. Besides, she knew that many internet celebrities went there too, and maybe they might even meet someone and get some business contacts. Xingwang ended up agreeing, and with that, all of them got into the car with him. While he was in the car, the protagonist thought that he now had some capital to invest, so maybe he would open his own media company in the future. And given his successful track record in the field, it certainly would not hurt to get to know a few celebrities. Before they went inside, Zinuo emphasized that the drinks there were a little expensive, so she could only cover 1 or 2 drinks for each person. Besides, she would feel a little pressured if they drank too much, because she was not such an adventurous person. She asked if there was any problem, but Qingting said no, because she would drink whatever came along. Gao Wen told Xingwang to drink only a little and have fun to distract himself, and he agreed. Xingwang looked around and thought that he had never imagined he would have the privilege of visiting the famous Bar Fuge. Just thinking about it already made him very excited about the whole situation. As soon as they entered, the music was very loud and people were dancing and enjoying the atmosphere. The 4 of them went to a table and Zinuo said she would have a margarita and asked what the others wanted to order. Qingting said that, for her, a pink lady would be fine. Gao Wen said she would like a non-alcoholic absolute lime because she still needed to drive. Zinuo asked what the protagonist wanted, but noticed that he was a little lost and thought that he was probably pretending to be a second-generation heir because he looked like someone who had never been to a bar of that level before. Xingwang realized that she was talking to him and asked what she had just said. Zinuo asked what he wanted to order, and the protagonist said that it was fine. Anything would do. Zinuo told the waiter that Xingwang would have a Long Island iced tea. But Qingting leaned closer and asked why she was ordering such a strong drink for him, questioning whether she was trying to make him reveal his true identity while drunk, and told her not to go too far. Zinuo emphasized that, in the end, a bar was meant for getting drunk, so there was no problem. The night continued, and Zinuo said that there was a bartender named Danny at Bar Fuyu who made incredible drinks. However, it was a little expensive, but she really wanted to try it. Gao Wen became worried, saying that her friend should know when to stop. Zinuo emphasized that the protagonist was pretending to be rich, so why could they not teach him a lesson? That way, they would make sure he did not try to do something of that nature again. She called Xingwang, but he was observing the people around him, thinking that he had seen some influencers who might have potential to become business partners, so he needed to make more money. But Zinuo became a little irritated, thinking that he was just pretending not to hear her. Suddenly, the protagonist looked at her and asked if she had said something. Zinuo emphasized that he seemed a little bored and asked if he would like to play dice. The protagonist asked how to play it. She placed the dice on the table and said that she would liven things up a little. She explained that if he happened to lose, he had to remove a piece of clothing, and if he did not want to, then he would have to pay 10,000, asking if he wanted to play. Xingwang took a deep breath and stood up, asking her not to forget that he used to be the company's operations manager, so he knew all her information and was also familiar with her skills. He asked if she really thought he would not know that she was an expert at dice games, and that no one in the company had ever managed to beat her. This made him think that she was trying to make him spend money. She tried to explain herself, but the protagonist continued saying that he already knew very well what she was thinking. Since he was just a mere operations guy earning only $5,000 a month with no future prospects, looking poor and inexperienced, but now wearing designer clothes, only famous brands, and taking all of them to eat at a high-class restaurant, it meant that she was thinking he was only pretending to be rich. He emphasized that he had been planning to let it go, since he did not want to see her idiotic face. However, she was seeing him as an easy target. But he was not stupid, so she should not think that he could not see the real looks of disdain and contempt she had been giving him since they met. The system appeared, saying that the host refused to get involved in internal conflict and would not be made a fool of, boldly responding to other people's schemes and avoiding falling into traps. Because of that, the reward was 1 million. Thanks to this, the host had entered another stage of life, embarking on a carefree journey. The system congratulated him for surpassing the 1 million mark with a current balance of 1,890,000. Xinguang emphasized that he indeed did not come from a rich family. Xinuo pointed her finger at him, saying that she had been right from the beginning because the protagonist was only pretending to be rich when, in truth, he was not. Xinguang told her not to be in such a hurry because he had not finished speaking. He moved even closer to her, saying that although he did not come from a rich family, he still had a lot of money, and for that reason, he would like to offer 300,000 for all her clothes. Then she could leave that place with 300,000, but completely naked, asking if she was interested. Xinhuo became embarrassed and shouted that he was outrageous. Gao Wen stepped into the middle of the argument and said that she had only been joking, so he did not need to get angry. She asked him to sit beside her and enjoy himself a little. Xinhuo continued with all her arrogance, saying that no one would believe he had all that money to offer her 300,000. But to show his true power, Xinguang shouted in front of everyone, saying that today he was willing to spend 300,000 to serve drinks to everyone, so no one would leave that place until they were completely drunk. Besides, he wanted to pay in advance and by debit immediately. One of the waiters went up to him, swiped the card, and said that the payment of 300,000 had indeed been completed. Everyone in that nightclub was impressed and thanked him, saying that he truly liked spending a lot of money because they had never imagined they would be treated that way by a complete stranger. The system said that the host had bought drinks for everyone and had been very generous and extravagant, so he had earned a reward of 666,666. Xinuo was shocked, thinking that he really did have all that money. Xinguang walked past her and said that he already knew she usually looked down on poor guys like him, who did not make much money, but that did not mean he intended to let her disrespect him in front of everyone. After all, people like her were just ants to him. Those who only liked looking at other people's wallets were also the easiest to humiliate with money. They sat at the table and the atmosphere between them became a little tense. Jingting looks at her friend and tries to say something, but suddenly Zinuo stands up saying she just remembered she has something to do and is already leaving. Then she starts running off angrily. The protagonist simply shakes the dice left on the table, deep in thought, but tells everyone to keep having fun since everything is paid for that night. A girl then approaches, recognizing Gao Wen, and asks if she performed badly that day and came there to complain. She moves closer, saying that Gao Wen's #1 fan didn't give her anything that day and asks if he will stop watching her live streams in the future. But Gao Wen just says she is not working right now and therefore does not want to talk about work at that moment. However, the annoying girl insists, saying she's only pretending to be innocent, that she's actually no longer popular and still acting like a saint. She tries to touch Gao Wen, but Gao Wen says that her business is none of her concern. The girl, who was holding a glass of alcohol, asked what was going on and told her not to be so distant. Gao Wen asked why the girl was sitting there. The young woman emphasized that they could not miss a good opportunity to do their live streams, because since they were internet celebrities, they should have good sense for good opportunities. She opened the live stream saying that she had just met Gao Wen at a bar and that this was a rare opportunity since they wanted to see her. But apparently she did not really want to participate in the live stream and asked whether they could convince her to agree. The viewers began sending messages to Gao Wen asking her to hurry up and do it, because this was an event they had all been waiting for. The young woman thought that the big shots from her company were ready to support her in surpassing Gao Wen and becoming the #1 dance streamer. And with an opportunity like this, they definitely would not let it go. Now it was only a matter of time before they made their moves. Gao Wen's phone rang and she said that she needed to answer it. As soon as she answered, the people from her company said that she needed to start the live stream immediately and not miss a good opportunity like this. However, she said that she was not in good condition to do that tonight, but the people from the company said that they had already paid for her to be at the top of the news and that she had to do that live stream even if she was not feeling well. If she did not start right now, she would be punished. The other young woman said that apparently she wanted to hide and not go live. Then Gao Wen decides to start the stream, and soon the two go to the dance floor. They begin dancing, and Qing King, watching, says that people are sending many rockets to both of them, but the other girl is leaving Gao Wen behind. Taking advantage of the situation, the girl starts speeding up even more, driving the fans crazy. While Gao Wen receives comments saying she is performing very poorly and comparing the two, showing that Gao Wen is far below, more people start joining the stream and commenting, asking why Wen, who is one of the top streamers, is being crushed in the votes like that and questioning why she is being humiliated by someone else in that way. The protagonist saw all of this and thought that she was playing dirty. The live stream battle between the two of them began, and Gao Wen said that without Brother Z, she did not even have a single rocket, and asked her followers to send her a few rockets. Suddenly, someone sent a rocket and she thanked them. Then, several more appeared on the screen, and she continued thanking them for the donation. The people in the live stream said that the votes had started changing drastically and questioned whether there might have been a bug in the system, because a big donor had appeared out of nowhere and started sending a ton of rockets per minute. The young woman who had challenged her thought that this girl had some secret donor. However, she thought that the money was just being thrown away and asked why he was spending more than that. Suddenly, another donation appeared, and Gao Wen thanked the big brother for the rocket, but thought that it was way too exaggerated. The other people also questioned who exactly this big brother was because they had never seen him donate before, and in such a short time, he had already donated more than 1 million. Some people thought that maybe it was even an agency forcefully promoting someone. However, other people said that the platform took around 60 to 70% of the donations and questioned whether an agency would throw away that much money just to promote someone. Xingwang asked if there was really any reason for them to keep doing this, because the victory had already been decided. The system appeared to him, saying that he had been extravagant as well as understanding. The host had spent money like water, showing extravagance that reached the heavens, sparing no expense and even becoming a little pretentious. For that reason, the system would not fall behind, extravagantly rewarding him with 5 million. Qingting said that this could not really be happening because even Gao Wen had already stopped, and yet this big shot was still donating, making her wonder whether some child had taken the phone of their rich parents and clicked accidentally. But Xingwang continued acting secretly, and people began entering the live stream saying that they had come to see all the donations and were there for the millionaire. Gao Wen was so surprised and shocked by that situation that she asked everyone to wait a little so she could breathe. Meanwhile, the protagonist continued donating several rockets. This went so far that it became breaking news. The news said that a mysterious donor had appeared in a small live stream battle on Xuanwen, and more than 2,000 rockets had been donated. Someone went to the group of big shots on Shu Yi's side and asked if anyone was simply going to let this pass. They emphasized that they needed to send more gifts to Shu Yi since there was only one millionaire on the other side, so everyone just needed to do what he was doing. Suddenly, all of them started donating, and Shu Yi thought that they had finally arrived. She smiled and thanked them for the rockets they were donating. She thought that her top fan wanted her to send private videos to him, because he was very rich and generous, so he definitely would not miss this chance to become a hero. Boss Kong and Boss Ri were there, so defeating those random people on the other side would be easy. But Xingwang liked a good fight and asked if they were really going to play like that. Then he needed to strike back and began donating several rockets, reaching 100 in a row. The system appeared again, saying that the host was incredible, so it wished him a long life and congratulated him for defeating the opponent's top fans and becoming the new biggest donor with a reward of 10 million. After receiving his reward, he donated another 500 rockets, causing Gao Wen's advantage to skyrocket all at once, and earning another 10 million as a reward, making Gao Wen the winner of the battle. But before it ended, he sent another 1,000 rockets, leaving her speechless. The system said that the more rockets, the more money, and congratulated him again for becoming the #1 donor of the day on the platform, with a reward of 10 million. The system was moved by the host's persistence in pressing buttons, so the reward was another 1 million. Gao Wen bowed and thanked the mysterious donor for all the support, because he had helped her win that match and had also brought her a lot of attention, since this was the first time a small streamer had reached so many millions of viewers. However, she would like to say that everyone worked very hard for their own money, so she did not want anyone to waste that much money on her. The viewers were impressed seeing that she was very pure and unpretentious, and that was very rare nowadays. Shui was completely irritated, questioning how that had happened. because all her effort had been for nothing, and in the end, it had only helped Gao Wen become even more famous. Tens of millions in donations, millions of viewers online. This was an absurd achievement that not even the best streamers on the platform could reach. Xingwang stood up and said that it was getting very late, so maybe it was time to go back to his bed. But before leaving, he called Shu Yi, telling her not to feel discouraged, because he thought she had done very well and also had several donors willing to support her. So she needed to keep working hard, and maybe one day, she would be able to surpass Gao Wen. Ching Ching laughed and said that the protagonist's words had probably made her even more curious, but Gao Wen only told her not to tease. Shu Yi was truly irritated by all of that, and Xing Wang left with the two girls. On the way out, Ching Ting asked if they had seen Shu Yi's face at the end, because that girl had turned white as a sheep, and she bet Shu Yi was freaking out now, since her plan had been completely annihilated. Because of that, that night had truly been enlightening, because she had managed to see the big donor, the #1 magnate of the platform. But she noticed that Gao Wen did not seem that excited. Gao Wen said that the truth was that she did not feel worthy of all of this, because she had never seen this fan in her entire life, and he had simply appeared out of nowhere and started donating money, so the situation had become a little uncomfortable. Cheng Ting said that it did not matter because he was a messenger from God, so she needed to get closer to that generous donor. She said she would send a message to that donor, and as soon as she sent it, Xing Wang's phone rang, saying that he had a new message. The two of them were surprised and looked at him. Ching Ting questioned whether that was not the official notification from the Zhuanyin platform because she had just sent a message to the mysterious donor and the protagonist had received it. Gao Wen also looked at him, a little suspicious, but the protagonist laughed, trying to disguise it, asking why the two of them were looking at him that way, because it was just a coincidence. He explained that he had just left his job, so he was receiving a lot of messages there because of his old work, and they had misunderstood everything. Gao Wen emphasized that just a short while ago, the protagonist had spent millions, and the other side had at least a few billionaires in assets. He agreed, saying that he only had a little money, but millions in a few minutes was a bit too much for him. But Ching Ting remained suspicious, because she had thought that this donor Wang had a Wang in his name, so it could very well be him. Gao Wen asked where the protagonist lived because she would like to drop him off at his house. The protagonist said there was no need, because he lived near Longhu New City, and it was completely out of her way, so he would take a taxi. Suddenly, someone arrived calling her by name. It was the protagonist's former boss. He said that he had imagined the background of that live stream looked a lot like the bar he was in, and that was good because he had wanted to take a look outside and found her. But Gao Wen did not feel very comfortable with that situation. He went up to the protagonist saying that this apparently was a former employee and questioned how an unemployed person dared to go there, asking if Gao Wen had invited that skillless guy who needed women to do things for him. But Gao Wen emphasized that this was not quite the situation, because the truth was that she was depending on the protagonist that night. He had paid for both the dinner and the drinks. The former boss was a little surprised, but said that she could not be serious, questioning whether she had fallen in love with that poor guy and was covering for him, because he already knew everything. Tonight the bill had been paid by a mysterious person, so how had the protagonist paid for those drinks? He emphasized that he had already understood what was happening there because poor guys did not have money, so they became very good at talking their way into finding girls with money. Ching Ting told manager He Shui that Xing Wang had really paid for everyone's drinks, but the manager became irritated, asking who gave her the right to speak and questioning whether she thought she was something just because she had a few fans. He emphasized that he had wanted to tell her something for a while because all those fans were fake. She was surprised and asked what he was talking about. The manager continued mocking her, asking if she really had not expected that because the company had spent a lot of money promoting her, buying several fake followers. After all, she only put on her makeup every day and barely landed any ads for exposure, so who would want to watch her? He emphasized that she was lost money for the company and should learn from Gao Wen, who had danced for one night and brought millions to the company. Ching Ting was shocked by all of this, and the manager continued saying that next time she needed to wear a little less clothing and put on less makeup because no one believed that she was really pure. He looked at Gao Wen, asking if she had not said that she no longer wanted to be a dance streamer. He said that she had earned a lot of money for the company today and had done an excellent job, so if she agreed to one more thing, he could tell the boss to transfer her to television roles. For example, if she spent one night with him. But the protagonist grabbed his arm and asked him to show a little respect. He, Shui, became irritated, saying that the protagonist was just a failure trying to play the hero. He questioned whether he could really give her resources with the money from his counterfeit clothes. But Xing Wang started getting angry and told him to leave immediately. Gao Wen was impressed by the real man standing in front of her to defend her honor. Because of that, she also gathered her courage and told the manager that if he dared to try doing that to her again, she would terminate her contract with the company immediately. But the manager continued laughing, asking how she would do that because she had signed a 5-year contract with the company and still had more than a year remaining. If she terminated the contract now, she would have to pay a penalty of 10 million. Could she afford that? Gao Wen emphasized that she had earned millions for that company in just that night, and with her savings, she believed she could afford it just fine. But He Shui continued mistreating her, saying that influencers who danced around wearing those kinds of clothes just like her were nothing more than prostitutes with price tags, because in ancient times, they would have lived inside a brothel. He kept moving closer to her, saying that he would be very honest, because even if she could pay the penalty, the company would never let her leave, since no one would stop milking a cash cow like her. He emphasized that she would be blacklisted in that industry with just one word from the boss. Xingwang stepped in front of her again, saying that if she really could not leave the company, then that was fine because he could simply buy Meow Meow Media and then the person leaving would not be Gao Wen, but the idiot who thought he was a demigod. The manager said that this was impressive and patted the protagonist on the shoulder, saying that he would be waiting for a poor bastard like him to buy the company. He spat on the ground, saying that he was already irritated by that situation because no one had the right to try showing off in front of him. As soon as he left, Qing Ting began trembling in a panic attack, asking if all her followers really were fake. Because if that was true, then all the big donors who donated money to her were just people hired by the company. Gao Wen tried to calm her friend, saying that this was not true because she had many people watching her makeup live streams. Besides, she also knew some big donors who truly liked her. He Shui only wanted to put her down, manipulate her, and make her think that she owed everything to the company, so she would always lower her head to him. Gao Wen told her friend to take a deep breath and not be upset by the words of that piece of trash. The protagonist only watched all of this as she thanked him for helping them that night. She also thanked Qing Ting for helping clarify things, even if they had irritated that idiot manager. Qing Ting said that it was fine because if it were not for all of that, she would never have discovered how much he looked down on her. Irritated, she shouted that he was a massive bastard. Gao Wen looked at the protagonist and said that they were only colleagues, so he did not need to do all of that for her. Xingwang smiled and said that it was fine, because he had also hated that idiot guy for some time and only needed a chance to tell him some truths. Gao Wen took a deep breath and extended her hand to the protagonist, saying that she did not know whether they would have the chance to meet again, but she hoped he would truly achieve great things in his life, telling him to take care of himself. The protagonist was surprised and took her hand, asking her to take care of herself too. After the farewell, the two girls got into the car and left. As soon as she left, the protagonist picked up his phone, thinking that he had been so focused on sending rockets that he had not even noticed the notification sounds. When he saw his bank balance, he realized that he was now a millionaire. He emphasized that he needed to hurry and buy a plane ticket to go back home. As soon as he bought the plane ticket, he thought that it was very expensive, because the ticket he used to buy before, by train, was only 300. As soon as he bought the ticket without making a fuss for 4,000, he received another system notification saying that it was not just the most expensive one, and congratulating the host for enjoying first class for the first time without hesitation. Because of that, he received a reward of 10,000. The next day, in his dormitory, someone began knocking on the door saying that it was time for rent. He woke up irritated, thinking that it was always the same thing, because 1 week before the date, the person was already bothering him, and it was not even actually time to pay the rent yet. The person outside continued shouting for him to pay the rent already and not pretend that he was not home. He got up at 6 o'clock and said that he was coming, asking whether she could not let people sleep in peace. The woman said that young people nowadays were always procrastinating. Every time, she had to go there to remind them to pay the rent and questioned whether he was not capable of doing it himself. Xingwang used his phone to scan the QR code and said that 1 full year of rent had been paid. This left her surprised when she saw that he had just sent 10,000 as payment. She wondered how that broke boy had managed to pay an entire year of rent all at once, because he always paid 1 month's rent right on the deadline. She said that there was an extra 400 he had sent, but since he was still very sleepy, Xingwang told her she could keep it and consider it a service fee so he would not be disturbed while sleeping for the rest of the year, then closed the door in her face. He threw himself back onto the bed, thinking that the flight was at 10 o'clock and that he could sleep a little more than 3 hours. His roommate got up, asking if he had won the lottery, and thought that paying for 1 year of rent was already insane, but he had also thrown away half a month's rent. The system said that it was shocked because the host had surpassed himself by paying 1 year of rent and even tipping the landlady. His ability to show off had reached new heights, so the reward was a new house in Swan Bay in Sang City. Upon hearing that notification, he got up in shock and looked at his hands where there was indeed a key, wondering if this was possible and if he had really won a house. He quickly changed clothes and jumped out of bed, while his roommate asked where he was going in such a hurry. The protagonist ran out, shouting that he was going back to his house and heading straight to the airport, and that he would not be back for a while. His roommate asked if he was not going to pack his bags, but the protagonist said there was no need, because as soon as he got the money, he would pay for a VIP room at the hospital for his mother. Meanwhile, inside the hospital, his father was with his mother, saying that Xingwang had just called and said that he would come back today and asked the two of them not to worry. The protagonist's mother said that she did not really know what had gotten into her son, but he was very excited, said he had earned money from a part-time job and sent 100,000 to them, but she wanted to know what kind of part-time job paid that much, so she hoped he had not gotten involved in anything illegal just to pay for her treatment. But the protagonist's father questioned how she could imagine he would do that, because she knew exactly what kind of person their son was. Xingwang slammed open the room door, shouting for his mother, and asked his father how she was. Worried, he asked if she was feeling well and if she had any discomfort. His mother sat up in bed saying that she was fine because she was only a little sick and needed a minor surgery, but her vital signs were very good. Besides, she emphasized that his father had already told him that he did not need to leave the city just to visit them. After all, he was now covered in sweat. She asked his father to give Xingwang an apple so he could eat something. But before eating the apple, the protagonist said that he had resigned, leaving his father and mother surprised by it. But his mother said that he was an excellent son, and even if he had resigned, it was fine, because he would find something better. His father agreed, saying that he had gone through many things to be there, and resting at home for a while might do him good. Xingwang was happy, thinking that his parents were his safe harbor, so he understood all those emotions exactly. He asked his father if he had already paid the medical bills. The protagonist's father said that he had borrowed the money just yesterday after speaking with him, and asked his son not to worry and to stay there talking with his mother. Besides, he emphasized that he would return the 100,000 Xingwang had sent, because a young man like him needed money for many things and did not need to worry about his parents. Xingwang refused and told his father to keep that money because he had given it to his parents. Besides, he wanted to know who his father had borrowed the money from, because they would return it immediately. The protagonist's father said it was only from a few relatives, but Xingwang asked if it was from his uncle and aunt. He became irritated when he found out, saying that he would pay it immediately. His father tried to stop him, saying that they would find a way to pay them back soon, and he did not need to worry about it because he could not solve everything. He emphasized that the protagonist had worked hard to save that money and did not need to spend it that way. Suddenly, his mother began crying, saying that all of this was her fault for being sick and demanding too much from the two of them. She said that her son worked very hard in the city, so how could they let him pay for the medical expenses? She questioned whether he thought she did not know that he was giving all his money to them while living a difficult life and never complaining about anything. Since her son's salary was only 5,000 and big cities were very expensive, he needed to pay rent, socialize with colleagues, and money was needed everywhere. Xingwang asked her not to say that and said that things were not that difficult since she was only imagining it. In truth, it was not that bad and he could handle it. He emphasized that he had gotten plenty of part-time work while working and that she did not need to worry about money, asking where she thought he had gotten that 100,000 for her. He emphasized that he would tell the doctors that they wanted the most competent treatment for her and would no longer worry about costs at all. Besides, he would immediately go to his uncle's house to pay them back and not owe anyone anything. He got onto a cart saying that he was going to Hutong Street 32. As soon as the cart began moving, the protagonist started trembling on top of it, asking why that road was even worse than before. He asked the driver if they had not been talking about repairing those roads around 2 years ago, so why was it still so uneven? The driver said that they had already done the repairs, but everything was worse than before. The contractors were the officials. They had run off with half the money meant for the repairs, and the roads were left that way. This made the protagonist even more irritated, saying that all those guys were nothing but pigs. He thought that this was a poor region in the middle of nowhere, far from the capital, and things were already difficult enough there. If his family had not been financially stable and his parents had not paid for his education, he probably would have been trapped in that city forever. A short while later, he arrived at his aunt and uncle's house and became irritated because they were supposedly close relatives, but they lived in a house hundreds of square meters wide, made with reinforced concrete, while he and his family had only a few dozen meters of brick and concrete. And if they had not taken all the compensation money from his grandfather's relocation, how could there be such a huge difference between the families? and now his parents had to borrow 50,000 for medical expenses. Irritated by that situation, he knocked on the door and a girl answered, asking who it was. When she saw the protagonist, she asked what he was doing there. She was Wang Ju. Xingwang was also surprised to see her and asked what she was doing at his uncle's house. Xingwang continued asking what she was doing at his uncle's house. Wang Ju did not know how to answer. Suddenly, another young man arrived and said that if the protagonist's sister-in-law was not at his house, then where else would she be? Xingwang finally understood what was going on and turned his face away, asking if his uncle was inside that house, because he had come to pay the debt. Wang Ju kept watching him and wondered why he was being so cold and whether he still liked her. The other young man touched her body a little more and asked why she was looking at the protagonist so much, because she was about to become his wife. Wang Ju explained that she was only looking at how pathetic he seemed, because it was fascinating. Looking at his clothes, there was not a single brand in sight, and he even said he lived in the big city, but apparently he was just a failure. Their countryside was much better, because her future husband could wear branded clothes whenever he wanted. The young man said that things had improved now. The protagonist entered the house and his uncle was playing cards. His uncle said that he was his nephew who worked in the city and was now a big city boy. The other said that a city boy probably earned a lot of money there. Another said that he had heard that a friend's daughter who worked in a city was earning 100,000 a month, and the protagonist had gone to university, so he must be doing well. The other young man arrived and began mocking the situation, saying that he really was doing very well, working like a dog just to earn only 5,000 a month, while his family had old women feeding pigs and earning 3,000. Besides, 5,000 was not enough to save anything in the end because he had heard that rent in the city was very expensive. And after rent, there was barely enough left to eat, and maybe that was not even true. The protagonist simply ignored everything, telling his uncle that he was there to pay the debt and would like to skip the small talk. The protagonist's uncle said that he was in no hurry because if his family was having difficulties, then he did not need to rush it since he would charge interest anyway. Xingwang emphasized again to his uncle that he was doing very well, so he did not want to keep borrowing money. His uncle continued playing cards and said that the protagonist did not need to be polite because he worked hard in the city and was getting by on his own while taking care of his family. Xingwang emphasized that he would pay the debt anyway. His uncle pointed to the debt book, saying that if he insisted so much, then he would not stop him because making money was always good. He asked Dakai to get the red book on top of the cabinet. Dakai handed over the book, saying that they were family and could not bear to see the protagonist under so much pressure because blood was thicker than water. His uncle praised the protagonist, saying that he was the university student of the family and was very proud, so he did not want to use the money and wanted everything as clear as crystal. And that was perfect. But they did not need to be so rigid when they were family. Xingwang transferred 51,000, including the interest, to his uncle, and asked if he had received it. His uncle was impressed to see that he had paid the entire debt all at once and checked, seeing that the money had indeed arrived. His uncle asked where he had earned so much money, and the protagonist laughed, saying that it was very obvious because he had worked in the city. Dakai said that the protagonist's family probably only wanted to preserve appearances at the cost of suffering. But the point was, what was dignity worth? Because he already knew everything. The protagonist's family was made up of poor people, and that 51,000 must have been the savings of an entire lifetime, which probably meant that the protagonist had spent everything he had. Wang Ju told her boyfriend that she would walk the protagonist to the door because maybe he could not accept that the two of them would see each other so often, since they were going to get married, but they were family and needed to understand each other. Dakai agreed, saying that it was good to let him know his place because that way that frog would stop staring at swan meat. She ran up to Xingwang, saying that they would be family now, so he did not need to cling to old feelings and act as if they no longer knew each other. She emphasized that the two of them were childhood friends and had grown up together, and she knew very well that he liked her. However, she had always considered him only her little brother, and she would soon be his sister-in-law, so it would be better for him to stop thinking about her that way. Because if people heard about it, it could be bad for his reputation and would go against common decency. Xingwang laughed, asking if she really believed that he liked her, and told her to look in the mirror at least a little to better understand the situation. Wang Ju became irritated and shouted, asking what he had just said. The protagonist asked what she meant because they were not childhood friends. They had only spread cow manure around and caught a few frogs together when they were children, and now she was acting as if that was something special. He emphasized that he really had thought she was not the type who looked down on the poor and flattered the rich, because she worked hard all the time and had always been kind to others. Because of that, he had not expected her to be this kind of person, but apparently she was just very good at pretending. But that did not matter to him since the two of them had no connection of any kind. Wang Ju emphasized that she understood the situation now. Since the protagonist could not have her, he was now looking down on her. And this was a very annoying situation. But in the end, she was still his sister-in-law and he needed to understand, leave the past behind, manage to move on and grow up. Wang simply stopped responding and turned away saying that she was crazy, making her more and more irritated. She ran in front of him, stopped and asked who he thought he was, questioning whether he really thought he was better just because he was good at studying, because that was a joke. And he was still just some nobody working for other people, completely useless, saying that spending his life studying would lead to nothing. And he was the exact definition of that. She asked what it mattered if she looked down on the poor because she loved the rich. And that did not matter. With his uncle's family, she would live in a giant house and eat the best food, while he would live in a tiny space, paying rent in the city and sharing a bed with others. Besides, his mother was still in the hospital, and even if he could cover 50 or 100,000, he still would not achieve anything. Because of that, he should be a little more grateful to her for speaking politely to him, and not test his luck, because no one would put up with him with that kind of attitude. Wang asked if she was done barking because she was staring at the sky while doing nothing useful, as if that were something good. He questioned whether she really thought everyone was desperate to be with her, because not even frogs were as idiotic as she was. She tried to insult him, but the protagonist interrupted, saying that, indeed, he did not have that much money and was not as capable and charming as her boyfriend. But even so, he worked hard, was diligent, respected his parents, and did not look down on anyone who worked hard so he could take care of himself. He emphasized that he had always thought this was particularly good and extremely better than people like her, who only focused on that tiny piece of land. He told her to stop acting like a lunatic, look in the mirror, and face reality. The system appeared, saying that the host had made a swift cut and severed ties without remorse. Suck others dry emotionally, not yourself. The host was rewarded with an apartment under renovation in BU City. She continued pointing her finger at the protagonist, but he grabbed her hand and pointed it back at herself, saying that both she and her boyfriend should just keep flattering each other like a good couple and stop interfering in other people's lives. Suddenly, a car came speeding by and passed through a mud puddle, splashing dirt onto the protagonist. Dakai stopped and rolled down the window, saying that he had not seen him, because he was in a hurry to visit the construction site and ended up not noticing him. After all, he was now the big boss at the construction site, in charge of building the road to the town, so he was a little busy and did not have time to chat. Dakai emphasized that if he could not find a job, then he could go work for him and carry bricks like his cousin, because he could help. Wang thought that he finally understood why the roads were so terrible, and apparently his uncle really had a family full of talents. But apparently it was time to serve justice for his own people. At the town construction department, one of the workers was treating the protagonist very well, saying that he could feel free to go there for tea whenever he wanted. Wang simply thanked him for all his kindness. The system announced justice because the host had spent his wealth for the greater good, building for his hometown, and the reward was 100 property deeds. He asked how many deeds there were, and the system said that there were 100 deeds, and asked if he thought that was too little, but the rewards were based on his actions. Wang apologized to the system, saying that he was not questioning it because the system kept getting stranger, since apparently all the wealth in the world was about to become his. Back at the hospital, Wang offered an apple to his mother, and she was happy, saying that he was very thoughtful because he was even cutting apples for her. Suddenly, a doctor appeared, saying that the surgery had been a success and that, now that her indicators had returned to normal, he would arrange her discharge. Wang did not take this very well and said that his mother had just come out of surgery the day before, was still under observation, and had no reason to be discharged. He emphasized that he had paid the hospital fees and wanted to continue her treatment with every available option. But the doctor kept saying that she would be discharged and asked the nurses to help the patient pack her things. Wang stood his ground again, asking what he had just said. His mother became worried and the doctor continued acting arrogantly, saying that it was exactly what the protagonist had heard, and questioned whether he had not understood something, because the patient was better now. So he needed to hurry up and free the room for another patient since he should not waste medical resources unnecessarily. The doctor asked if he liked the hospital so much that apparently he wanted to die there. Wang slammed the knife onto the table, startling the doctor a little. He pointed at the protagonist, irritated, saying that he was holding a knife in a hospital and trying to cause trouble, so he needed to put the knife down or he would be taken away by security. His mother tried to get up, saying that she would like to go home because there was no reason to spend more money there and she was already better, since the doctor had said there were no problems. Besides, they could be more comfortable. Wang continued telling his mother that she had just come out of surgery and her wound had not healed yet, so she needed to be careful when moving. The doctor told the protagonist that his mother apparently had already understood, and a good son should listen to his mother. The doctor looked at the nurses and told them to make sure everything was clean without leaving a trace of poverty and bad luck there. The doctor left the room and the protagonist became irritated. He told his mother that they should not waste the apple and asked her to eat first, because he was going to tell his father to pick them up. But before that, he needed to take care of a few things. His mother kept telling her son not to fight with them, because ordinary people like them could not cause trouble. But the protagonist told her not to worry because he would not do anything. In the attending doctor's office, he was on a call saying that he had already arranged everything and that his friend's wife could come now. After all, even a twisted ankle should be taken seriously and could take up to 100 days for tendons and bones to heal. Dakai told Dr. Lee that he really worked fast. The doctor said that this was obvious because they needed to be quick, since that Xingwang was just a poor boy, so how could he compare with Dakai's generosity? They had delayed paying the medical expenses for half a month, and it was only thanks to Dakai's family that they had managed to cover the costs. Letting them stay longer would be a waste of medical resources, and it would all be thrown away. Dakai smiled and told him to leave things with the director, and that he would pay for dinner later to properly thank him. Dakai hung up the phone while thinking that maybe the protagonist really thought he could cause trouble. Lee also laughed and looked at the payment he had received, saying that this guy was very good at handling things. But the protagonist, who had been watching everything, realized that the doctor had received a bribe, and apparently they could play with money because money really could make the impossible happen, and now they had put that into practice. He went to the director's office and knocked on the door. When he entered, the director asked who he was. Xingwang said that he was just a family member of an ordinary patient. The director said that if he was sick, he could go straight to the registration desk because he was not seeing patients there. Xingwang told the director that he would like to discuss donating a building to the hospital. But the director was looking down on the protagonist, saying that if he had any problem, he could consult reception because he was very busy and could not walk him to the door. But as soon as he realized what the protagonist had said, he was impressed and questioned whether he really knew how much it cost to donate the construction of a building like that. The director thought that this young man looked very simple, and that his clothes probably did not even cost 200, so how could he donate a building? Maybe he was just joking. Xingwang told the doctor that he knew very well how much it cost because he had already looked into it and there was no problem at all, asking if they could continue the conversation. He thought that building a small building in the countryside cost only around 1 million, and currently that was nothing to him because spending a mere million to benefit people and solve his problems was very worthwhile. He continued telling the director that he understood that his ward was always full and that there was often not enough space to place patients, so he wanted to donate a building. First, this was to make things more convenient for patients who needed to be hospitalized in the future. That way, they could receive accommodation after surgery. Secondly, he would also like the director to investigate any corrupt practices inside that hospital. The director said that he truly understood that patients' families might have complaints about beds, but there was no need for suspicion. The director thought that maybe the protagonist was only there to find an excuse to report the hospital. Xingwang continued explaining that he also knew the director did not have much he could do, given the lack of beds. However, in that situation, some people took advantage to make dirty money, giving already scarce beds to special connections, abusing the debts of ordinary patients, and he thought that was very wrong. The director became a little irritated, stood up and shouted, saying that he had been in the administration of that hospital for years, as had the doctors of that countryside hospital, and he had never accepted bribes or gifts because they were very strict about red envelopes. Xingwang emphasized that his mother had just undergone major surgery yesterday and was in the recovery process, but today the attending doctor was forcing her discharge to make room for other patients. He emphasized that, as far as he knew, the next patient only had a twisted ankle and it was a simple treatment that could be done at home. The director said that the protagonist was probably just making it up, because even if that ward was overcrowded, they would not discharge a patient who had just come out of surgery. That did not align with the necessary medical procedures. And even if a patient insisted on being discharged, they would need a signed liability form. If the protagonist really wanted to continue with this story, he at least needed to present reasonable and factual evidence. Xingwang showed a recorder and asked the director not to get so stressed and just listen to that recording first. As soon as the director pressed play, the recording said that everything had already been arranged and that his friend's wife could come right now. It could take up to 100 days for tendons and bones to heal. They needed to be quick. That Xingwang was just a poor boy, so how could he compare with his generous family? They had delayed paying the medical expenses for half a month, and it was thanks to his family that they had managed to cover the costs. Letting them stay longer would be a waste of medical resources, and everything would be thrown away. The director questioned how he would know that the recording was not fake. The protagonist began to wonder whether the director was just naive or deliberately trying to cover everything up. Xinguang picked up his phone and said that even if he thought that recording was fake, the building was not. He called Chief Engineer Kang, saying that he would like to build a new building for the municipal hospital and asked if he had some time to discuss the project. The protagonist asked if Kang could go to the director's office to discuss the details with him, because that would be great and everything was arranged. The director stared at the protagonist, thinking that he could keep acting because he wanted to see how far this would go. Xing Wang put his phone on speaker and said that maybe the director did not believe that a building was falling from the sky, so he could explain a little. He handed the phone to the director, saying that it would not take more than a few minutes of his time, so he could not let a few minutes of stubbornness cost him an entire building. The director took the phone and said that this was Director Liu from the municipal hospital. As soon as Kang said something, the director was impressed when he realized that this really was Engineer Kang's voice. The engineer said that the director was very lucky to get a free building like that. Liu said that he understood, but now he needed to hang up. The director thought that this young man really was very rich, despite keeping a low profile. The two of them sat on the sofa, and the protagonist asked if the director believed him now, because he should also give an answer about the recording. After all, if he could donate a building to the hospital, then why would he fake a recording? The director emphasized that the recording alone was not enough evidence. Xing Wang said that if one building was not enough, then maybe he could donate two. The director was impressed by this, and the protagonist stood up, saying that he had no other requests and only hoped that the director would severely punish the corrupt doctors through an investigation into unfair practices inside that hospital, bringing back fair opportunities so that all patients could be treated by doctors. Liu agreed with the protagonist, but before he left, he asked if he could know his name. But the protagonist said that he was just an ordinary boy from a simple farming family, simply doing what was right for ordinary patients. So his name did not matter, but if he needed a name, he could just write Messenger of Justice. As soon as Xingwang left the room, the director picked up the phone and shouted for them to immediately bring the most recent discharge records, because he wanted to see which patients had been discharged after surgery. A short while later, one of the nurses went to the doctor and said that the director was waiting for him in his office. Li knelt on the floor in front of the director, begging not to be fired because he had elderly parents and young children to support and he could not lose his job. Liu asked what was going on because the doctor had elderly parents and children, but apparently the patients' families did not have all of that. A doctor like him, without any morality, needed to find another job because that municipal hospital could not afford people like him. The next day, Dakai was relaxing with his feet in the water, while his girlfriend praised him, saying that his career was booming and that they would soon be able to buy a house in the city. Suddenly, another man slammed the door open and shouted at Dakai, saying that he had said he had great connections and had even bribed a doctor. So how had his wife just packed her things and was already being sent away? His wife's injury had worsened because of all that mess, and she was so angry that she would not even let him enter the room. Dakai stood up, confused, telling him to wait a moment because the doctors probably did not know they were so close, but he would call and explain the situation. He tried calling the doctor, but the number he dialed simply no longer existed. In the courtyard of the protagonist's family home, several things were being delivered. His mother remained shocked, telling her son that he was hiring all those men and buying all that equipment, and that it must be very expensive. Xingwang explained to his mother that all of it had been paid for by the hospital, and that they had not spent any money. That Dr. Li had been fired for just cause, and the hospital was trying to compensate them, so they had arranged all of that for them. Besides, they were going out, and afterward they could enjoy themselves without worrying. His mother said that it was fine because she had finally understood the whole situation. Xingwang thought that he was doing good deeds without seeking recognition, just like Lei Feng, and that was very good. Suddenly, Dakai entered the protagonist's house shouting at him, asking if he was the one to blame, because he had gotten a hospital room for his friend and spent more than 10,000, and now it had all been for nothing. The protagonist's mother asked what he was talking about. Xingwang was happy because that idiot had just admitted everything. He shouted, saying that apparently it had been him after all, because he had been wondering why his mother, who had just undergone surgery, had been kicked out so suddenly, and in the end, his dear relative had spent 10,000 just to drive out his own mother. Dakai tried to cover it up, asking who wanted to drive out his mother, because it was normal to be discharged after getting better. Besides, he told the protagonist to stop pretending, because if he had not done something behind the scenes, then the hospital would not have done all of that for him. Xingwang said that this was because of the director, because he had exposed that corruption in the hospital, and he was compensating those who had been harmed. Dakai continued shouting at the protagonist, saying that he would not believe so many lies, and said that he needed to be compensated because the protagonist had no idea how long he and his friend had taken to build that connection. All his road construction projects had been introduced by him, so he did not even know how many packs of cigarettes he had given and how much money he had spent. And now that the protagonist had offended him, causing serious losses, he needed to take responsibility. Xingwang told Dakai that everything he was saying made no sense at all because he was a super rich guy, a big boss who made millions a year, so there was no reason for him to come there and extort money from someone as poor as him. The protagonist said that Dakai should ask himself how a guy like him, making less than 5,000 a month, having a small apartment in the city, and after paying rent not even having enough left to eat, as he himself had said, could have the power to interfere with a rich man like Dakai. And regarding all of this, it must simply be karma screwing over someone who acted arrogantly. While the protagonist was leaving, he emphasized that some people in life use so much dirty money that they began to believe everything could be solved with money, since they did not believe there could be justice in that world. Dakai thought that the protagonist only knew how to talk, and screwed people like him would not have that much power. It must have just been bad luck, and because he was irritated, he had made bad decisions. He left saying that the protagonist's family would die poor. Xingwang watched him, thinking that this guy was just an idiot, and told his mother to keep walking. She became worried, saying that the boy had been very furious and asked if it was possible that he might harm their family. But Xingwang emphasized that he would very much like to see him try. While Dakai was leaving, he crossed paths with a car and thought that it might be Manager Kong. But he quickly changed his mind, thinking that he must have seen wrong because he would not go to such a remote place. Kong stopped in front of the protagonist's house and opened the door, thanking him for that road and that building. Xingwang was surprised by this and tried to smooth over the situation since he did not want his mother to know that he had paid for all of that. He said that the manager was very generous because he had seen his broken-down car on the road, was heading home early, and decided to lend a hand. He told his mother to look at how the big shots there were truly polite. Kong realized that something was wrong and ended up going along with it, saying that it was natural to help someone repair that road. He sat in front of the house while thinking that the protagonist was probably hiding his true identity from his parents. Xingwang went over to Kong and hugged him, telling his mother that he needed to handle a few things with him, so he would go inside first. He pulled the manager aside and said that he would like to keep a low profile on that trip because he did not want others to know about it, much less his family. Kang was even more impressed, saying that he finally understood. Apparently, the protagonist wanted to do good deeds without taking credit for himself. He thought that Xingwang was truly a great man, not exposing his wealth or showing off to others, only doing good in secret. Kong told the protagonist that everything he had asked for had already been done, and the protagonist praised him, saying that he really was efficient. Dakai called Mr. Zhao, but Zhao told him that, regarding the road repairs, he no longer needed to get involved. Dakai was surprised and slammed on the brakes, saying that everything had already been agreed on before, and that he had already arranged the workers' schedule. So how could he receive information like that so suddenly when he still needed to pay the workers' wages? Zhao explained that there were new regulations in the construction sector, and Dakai's qualification team had not passed the latest inspection, so they were in a very tight situation there. Besides, this was all they could talk about now because he needed to handle other things and had no time to explain everything. He hung up the phone and left Dakai unable to believe what he had just heard. Zhao thought that he had no other choice, since that boy had offended Manager Kong. Sometime later, inside a private room, Dakai brought some gifts to Zhao, asking if they had not already agreed before, because the road construction work would be subcontracted to him, and Zhao would only sit back and take his share. Zhao continued enjoying himself with his girls, and Dakai asked what he thought about adjusting the percentage from 30 to 40%, but Zhao just kept staring. Dakai thought that he had just hit the right point, because that guy probably thought the percentage had been too low. But apparently Zhao was just very stingy because at the last minute he was trying to apply pressure. Dakai smiled and emphasized that everyone knew this qualification review was only a formality because he could find a shell company and go through the process again, emphasizing that he would not put Zhao in a difficult situation. Zhao stood up angrily and slapped the gift on the table, shouting and asking who had said that those qualification documents could be forged. He questioned whether Dakai really thought a few cigarettes would make him commit a crime. And apparently Dakai thought he was talking to a starving man. Dakai began picking up the cigarette boxes from the floor and explained that this was not exactly what he meant. But Zhao remained irritated and asked what exactly he was trying to say, questioning whether Dakai thought all those words he had said were just nonsense and that he was trying to play hard to get. Dakai kept trying to apologize and said that he would raise the percentage to 50%. Zhao said that he had treated him like a brother until now, but now Dakai was trying to harm him. He ordered the security guards to get that boy out of there immediately. The security guard kicked Dakai out, saying that he should never go near Mr. Zhao again. A short while later, a man took Zhao to another door. As soon as he entered, he saw Xingwang and Kong sitting there. He began laughing and apologized for making them wait so long. Zhao thanked the protagonist, saying that he was very kind to the people of that town, so he would like to thank him for the funds he had donated for the road construction. But Xingwang thought that this guy was a hypocrite and an opportunist. Xingwang emphasized that it was nothing special, because he was not interested in the affairs of a messy village. He was only doing this because his parents were getting old and had trouble walking. So, if the road was bad and they were not careful, they could end up twisting their ankles, which would be very bad. He asked Zhao if that road would not fall apart within a year. Zhao thought that he would let it slide only because he was rich and asked how that could happen, emphasizing that the roads being built would definitely meet the protagonist's expectations. Xingwang was happy, saying that this was what he wanted to hear and that he would leave this responsibility to Zhao, hoping not to be disappointed. The system notified him, calling the host noble because he had completed the task of building roads and houses in his hometown in only 2 days and 1 night. Not only had he spent money generously, but he had also shown high moral character, and the system would reward the host with a bonus, hoping that he would never forget his original intention and remain true forever. Xingwang only wondered why the system had been so quiet over the past few days, but apparently it had been planning something very big. In the garden of the protagonist's uncle's house, Wangju was angry with Dakai, saying that he was lying there playing on his phone all day and had not even swept the floor or cleaned anything. She emphasized that if she had known he only talked big, and that getting the project was all a lie, she would have chosen the protagonist instead of him, because he was in the city to get real work opportunities. Dakai became furious and stood up, asking what she had just said. Wangju remained angry, saying that it was exactly what he had heard, because even a domestic bird could fly away and try something while he was being useless. If she were in his place, she would already be kneeling before Zhao if she had to. She could not believe how good he was at showing off, because he still had not done anything right. She started leaving the house, saying that she was going to find the protagonist, because they had grown up together and he would certainly take better care of her. But Dakai lost control and told her to stop immediately, grabbing her by the clothes. He slapped her across the face, saying that she was nothing but a shameless woman, because she had never earned a single cent in her life and still dared to criticize him. Meanwhile, at the protagonist's house, Kong handed a document to his parents, saying that some details were there and that they could look at them later. The two of them were a little confused and asked what it meant. Kong explained that the construction of that road would affect their property a little, because they needed to use 1 square meter of their land. And to express his apology, they were planning to build a house for the two of them as compensation. The two were surprised, and the manager said that if this was still not enough, then they could add a little monetary compensation as well. The two of them could not believe it and began thinking about when that village had become such a lucky place, because besides getting a new house for 1 square meter, they were also receiving an offer of money. They thought that this was too much luck, and the protagonist's mother said that the house was already more than enough, while his father shouted, calling out, saying that someone was going to build a new house for them. A few days later at the bus station, Xingwang was saying goodbye to his father and mother because he needed to go back. His mother told the protagonist that even if working in a big city was very difficult, he should take care of his health and not push himself too hard because the next time he came home, they would be able to move into a bigger house. Xingwang hugged her, saying that she should not worry so much because he would take very good care of his health. But now he needed to go, otherwise he would miss the ride to the airport. His father also said goodbye, saying that he would be waiting for him to come back. Xingwang sat in the waiting room while thinking that this trip had been worth every cent. Suddenly, Gao Wen appeared there and was surprised, asking what he was doing there. The protagonist explained that he had returned to his hometown to see his mother and was going back today. Gao Wen apologized because she had forgotten to ask earlier since she had heard that his mother was sick, and that he had left work because they had not given him leave. Because of that, she wanted to know how his mother was now. Xingwang told her not to worry so much because it was nothing too serious, and his mother was already recovering very well. Gao Wen said that it was very good to hear that, but that she was there because she had gone on a business trip since the company wanted her to change her image a little. Because of that, she had gone there to work with a rural revitalization company and had just finished now, so she was about to go back when she saw him. And apparently the world was very small since the two of them had met in a completely unfamiliar place. Xingwang laughed and said that it really was a great coincidence. Gao Wen asked if he already had any career plans and which company he was thinking of going to, but if he did not want to, he also did not need to answer that. Xingwang laughed and said that it was no secret because he was not going to another company but starting his own business. Meanwhile, he thought that he had even rented a building right in front of his former company just to irritate his former boss. Gao Wen was very happy to hear this and said that if the protagonist needed anything, he just had to ask her, because she knew some nice directors and photographers who were not too expensive. Suddenly, her phone began ringing and she apologized, saying that she needed to answer it. She thought that her boss was going crazy because he had already called 100 times in a day. As soon as she answered, Shui began shouting at her, asking if she really thought she was important just because she had made a little money now, and asking how she dared to ignore all the messages he had been sending her. He ordered her to get online now to compete with Jade's team because they had been tagging her for half an hour. Gao Wen explained that she had already notified him an hour ago that she was about to board, and she believed that everything was fine. Her boss became even more irritated, asking if she still had not boarded the plane, because this had to be some kind of joke, and ordered her to do it before boarding. Gao Wen emphasized that she was already about to board and the next flight would only leave in 10 hours, and maybe she would not even be able to get a ticket at such short notice. Besides, she was on her rest time. But Shui asked if she was really trying to make him laugh with rest time in that industry, and asked if she really thought the company was helping her for nothing. If she missed the flight, she only needed to wait 10 hours at the airport and the problem would be solved. Gao Wen began getting irritated and said that she had already earned enough for that company because she had been at the top for 6 months, and no one was helping her with absolutely anything. Shui asked what that had to do with anything, because her contract was still valid and until it ended, she only needed to do what he told her. He continued taking advantage of women just because he was the boss. He told her to stop arguing and go online now, because if she said another word, he would consider it a breach of contract. The protagonist noticed that she was a little irritated and asked if everything was all right. As soon as Shui heard the protagonist's voice, he said that apparently she was with him, and now he understood why she was unwilling, because she probably was not even at the airport and must be naked on top of a bed. Gao Wen became embarrassed and asked him to stop spreading rumors, because she had already sent a photo of her boarding pass in the company chat as a report. Shui said that if this was true, then why could she not start a live stream to prove it? Because he would really like to see whether she was not in bed with Xingwang. She became even more embarrassed, and the protagonist took the phone, saying that there was only a contract termination fee, and asked how much it was, because he would pay it. Besides, that entire call was being recorded, and he would be sued for defamation. Shui asked how he could afford the contract termination fee, and told him to stop pretending to be rich. But the protagonist hung up on him, making him even angrier. Gao Wen asked if he was really going to pay the contract termination fee for her. She wondered what right she had to accept such kindness. She told the protagonist that actually the situation inside that company was still very good, because her boss only caused trouble once in a while. And right now, they would demand an absurd penalty for breaking the contract, so there was no need to let them gain such a huge advantage. She emphasized that she was also saving money to pay off that debt. Xingwang explained to her that she did not need to feel bad about it because he was also doing it for his own benefit. He emphasized that he was starting a media company right in front of the Meow Group and wanted to find familiar faces to help him in the beginning. So what could be better for gaining recognition than stealing the best talents from those idiots? Gao Wen was surprised and asked if the protagonist really meant that he was going to start a business to rival them. She was so impressed that she began wondering who exactly that boy was and how he could have so much money. The protagonist emphasized that the salary he could offer at the beginning was a pure commission model, with half of her monthly earnings going toward paying the termination penalty. After the contract termination, they would split the net income 70% to 30%. 30% would go to him and 70% to her. She was happy, saying that if he was not a kind person, then no one else in that world could be. Xingwang smiled and asked if she thought that percentage was too low, but she said that was not it and that this percentage was actually very high, saying that he did not need to help her that much. Gao Wen thought that a live streaming company giving a 50% split would already be very good, and the protagonist was paying her contract termination fee, so giving her 20 to 30% would already be normal. Xingwang told her that she was the only one in the Meow Group who had never looked down on him, so she had helped him a lot, and now he was only repaying all the kindness she had shown. Since she had treated him as an equal from the very beginning, it was natural for him to return all that kindness. Besides, he had a great eye for people and believed that she would have a bright future. For that reason, he was asking her to change jobs to help him make a lot of money, because he believed from the bottom of his heart that she would be able to bring in far more money than the termination penalty. Basically, he was only advancing the payment for her. Gao Wen was moved, thinking that the protagonist was clearly offering her a branch to save her from drowning. Even so, he insisted on making it seem as if she was doing him a huge favor. Happily, she smiled and said that she accepted. Sometime later, inside the Meow Group media office, the protagonist and she went to his former boss's office, and he angrily asked if she was really going to believe what that man said in bed when her mind was shaken by desire. Because if she kept following that idea and the protagonist could not pay, then she would be the one left with all the debt. Xingwang, irritated, told him to shut up, stop wasting time, and immediately call the legal department, because he was there specifically to terminate her contract and did not have time to waste there. Shui stood up, asking if the protagonist knew how much that girl was worth now and whether he could really pay her contract termination fee, because he had heard that he had recently made some money and was loaded with cash. But when poor people suddenly got rich, they could easily lose themselves. He touched the protagonist's shoulder and said that, as his former supervisor, he needed to remind him that sudden wealth was like a castle in the air and could disappear in the blink of an eye, because when he ended up in debt, his life would be over. Xingwang pushed his former boss's hand away and said that money was a renewable resource. The more he spent, the more he had, so he did not need to worry about it. And judging by how he was losing his patience, his former boss was probably truly afraid that the protagonist could pay the penalty. Shui trembled and realized that he had been exposed. However, he tried to show that he was still very confident, saying that this was not his company and that he was not the only one spending or making money there, so he should have nothing to fear. Xingwang took a deep breath and said that his former boss had little power and still used it to intimidate people, so he was truly worried about Shui's future. But the former boss asked what the protagonist was so proud of, telling him not to forget that he had once been nothing more than a dog under his command. Xingwang explained that actually he had been a legally employed worker who had signed an employment contract, and if he kept calling his workers dogs, then he would be sued because of it. Besides, he should remember the company's 5-year clause prohibiting the spread of false and defamatory statements or information that harmed the reputation of either party, valid even after contract termination. So he would like to emphasize that if he heard Shui spreading malicious rumors again, the right to sue him on Gao Wen's behalf would still be valid, and it would happen. A short while later, inside the meeting room, the HR director said that the contract for both parties was there and that they needed to sign it. Gao Wen said that it was fine. Shui asked if she was really going to sign because that boy had only managed to get a little money, and if she followed him just because of that, she would have a lot to regret in the future. Gao Wen signed the contract, saying that she did not need his concern because the contract had already been signed. Shui remained irritated and said that the termination agreement had already been signed and questioned when the payment would be made, asking the protagonist not to pretend to be generous just to get a signature and then disappear, leaving the mess to her. Xingwang showed his phone and asked what the hurry was, telling him to check, because the payment had been made 1 minute ago. Shui asked if he really had tens of millions in cash, or if he was just joking. But the protagonist told him to stop being an idiot because whether it had really been paid or not, he could personally verify it with the finance department. Xingwang looked out the window and said that being part of upper management was really nice, because the view from the building was excellent. He laughed and told manager He that they had a long future ahead of them. The system congratulated the host for understanding the true essence of spending money, because money only grew when it was truly spent wisely. Because of that, the protagonist had leveled up, going from not looking at price tags to terminating contracts without asking the cost. And the reward for all of this was 99,999,999. The protagonist saw that reward and thought that sucking that company dry was no longer just a dream. Outside the commercial building, Qing King ran over, calling the protagonist, saying that this was a huge coincidence. She told Gao Wen that she had just heard she had resigned and asked if they could meet in the future. Gao Wen did not know exactly what to answer, and the protagonist asked why that would not be possible. They were in that commercial building, and she could go there to the cafeteria for lunch. Qing Ting was a little lost, not understanding what was happening. But suddenly, the protagonist received a call and said that he needed to answer. As soon as he answered, a man said that his property certificate was ready and asked when he would like to pick it up. The protagonist said that he would go soon. The woman laughed and said that they would be waiting for his visit. Xingwang thought that he had almost forgotten he still needed to inspect that house. He told Gao Wen to take some time to rest and plan the future business, because he needed to handle a few things. She smiled and said that she would do her best, then answered Qing Ting's question, saying that Xingwang had paid her contract termination fee. Qing Ting said that she still could not believe that the former office handyman was actually a wealthy magnate, and one really could not judge a book by its cover. Meanwhile, at another company, a girl was saying that the VIP client was arriving and that they needed to stay alert so they would not disrespect him, because that was crucial for their performance. Because of that, they needed to make sure everything was perfect. The general manager said that he understood, and because of that, he would organize the reception immediately, ordering everyone to gather right away. The man said that Mr. Hong Xingwang, who had bought the 300 million house, was arriving, and everyone needed to go to the entrance to welcome him. They needed to make sure their clothes were appropriate and that they presented themselves well, because this was important for maintaining the reputation of Red Chung Real Estate. The man said that he was a very important guest, so they could not be careless. The girl became a little worried and asked manager Wang if he had any photo of this buyer because she was worried about greeting the wrong person. Wang explained that this young man was a mysterious magnet, so how could they have a photo? Rich people like that usually had a great presence. When he arrived, that place would be illuminated. He emphasized that she had been in sales for a long time, so how could she not have that basic judgment? She laughed and said that she understood. He touched something and shouted, saying that there was dust on his hand and ordered everyone to clean it again until not a single grain of dust remained, because they had to give the VIP client an excellent experience. A short while later, the protagonist finally arrived and looked at everyone, thinking that this was what he expected from the first-class real estate brand Red Chung Swan Bay. Even the sales office looked impressive. However, he did not know why all those people were there, and maybe they were just waiting for the company president. He entered alone, and when he looked inside, he thought that the sales office really was very large, but there was no one inside. Maybe everyone was outside, and this promising house seemed a little suspicious. He looked at the model, saying that the landscaping of that villa area was really beautiful, with a pool for each house, exactly like on television shows, but he still did not know where exactly his house was located. The girl from before came up to the protagonist and asked what kind of house he would like to see because she could show him around. Wang called Irene. As soon as she approached, he asked if he had not already told her that they were not receiving other clients and questioned why she was not properly taking care of the entrance. Irene said that this boy was still a client. Wang scolded her, saying that, according to his calculations, the VIP client should arrive soon, so everyone should go outside so the client would not feel disrespected. Irene stood firm, saying that this did not seem right because they had not even put up a notice. But Wang said that she was a very naive girl and that he would handle the situation himself. He looked at the protagonist and said that this guy probably did not even have 200 yuan in his pocket, yet dared to enter the Swan Bay sales office. He thought that the protagonist was interfering with the arrival of the VIP client, so they needed to get rid of him immediately. Wang approached, saying that some people should know their place, because if they could not afford it, they did not need to waste people's time and emotions. So, if the protagonist wanted to buy, he needed to do it quickly, because what was the point of looking around forever? Xingwang looked at Wang and asked if he was saying that to him. Wang simply ignored the protagonist and called Irene again, saying that the place was full of dust, so she needed to clean everything again as quickly as possible. Because if the VIP client questioned the cleanliness, everything would be ruined, so she needed to sweep it straight into the trash. Xingwang continued saying that how would he know if the place was good without looking, and whether it was suitable for him or not. The manager said that judging by his appearance, he seemed not to have even 200 yuan in his pocket, and he could not afford houses that cost 300,000 per square meter. Wang emphasized that he had already given him a chance to leave with dignity, but if he insisted on embarrassing himself, then he could not blame him. Xingwang said that the management there did not seem very good. Besides, there were people who judged by appearance, so he did not think those houses were really worth such a high price. The manager said that he was only being rude because he could not afford them. Suddenly, the protagonist's phone began to ring, and he answered. The woman from before asked if the protagonist had already arrived at the sales office and said that if he had any questions, he could ask manager Wang. As soon as Wang heard that voice, he thought it sounded very familiar. The protagonist asked who the manager was because if it was who he was thinking of, then Wang had said that he was embarrassing the place and was not worthy of buying a house. So maybe he really was not worthy and would buy somewhere else, asking if they could cancel the transaction immediately. The woman stood up anxiously and asked the protagonist to sit down, begging him to wait just a little, because she would be there in an instant. She thought that the manager had probably lost his mind and went downstairs angrily, thinking that there had probably been a misunderstanding. She went to her driver and told him to go to the Swan Bay sales office as quickly as possible. While she was in the car, she called and questioned what manager Wang Sheng had done, because if that mysterious rich client was offended, he would be in big trouble. After all, she had already told him to handle the matters related to the VIP client, but apparently he had forgotten to listen. He asked Director Lee to wait a minute because he could take care of it, but before he could say anything else, she hung up on him. Sheng looked irritated and shouted, saying that he had already ordered the area to be cleared, but no one had listened because the rich client must be very angry, thinking that they were receiving other people. Xinguang thought that judging by the look the manager had made earlier, maybe he could at least recognize his superior's voice, but apparently he had not understood. Sheng began pulling Irene's ear, making her cry while he shouted, asking what the point was of being pretty if she could not work properly because now that she had offended the rich client, he might lose his job because of her. She began crying and with a trembling voice told the manager that she was only doing her job. The manager went up to the protagonist and pushed him, saying that he was just a poor nobody and that he did not care what kind of connections he might have in Hongcheng because not even the president could help him. He ordered the protagonist to get out of there so he would not harm the business. Suddenly, the director arrived shouting at the manager. Sheng continued ordering the protagonist to leave immediately. As soon as he looked at the director, he said that she had finally arrived and tried to explain what had happened, but she simply ignored him and walked toward the protagonist. He thought that the director was probably irritated that the poor boy was still there, but the director bowed and called the protagonist Mr. Hang, introducing herself and saying that her name was Li Wanying, vice general manager of Hongcheng Real Estate, but that he could call her Xiao Li if he preferred. She emphasized that she deeply apologized for his unsatisfactory experience because the manager had been disrespectful, but she would like to ask for his forgiveness. Sheng could not believe that the director had allowed that boy to call her Xiao Li. Wan Ying stated that she would improve management to prevent such discrimination in the future. Irene was surprised to see that this boy was the VIP client they had been waiting for. The director continued saying that they treated everyone who came to the company with utmost equality and sincerely hoped that he could give them another chance. The manager still did not understand and asked the director if this was serious, questioning how that boy could be the rich client. After all, the mysterious client, the buyer of a 300 million property, how could he be so young and look so poor, without even branded clothes or a striking presence? So why would he wear such cheap clothes if he had so much money? Wan Ying went up to the manager and continued reprimanding him, saying that she had warned him several times never to underestimate any client, but he had ignored her words. Sheng thought that now he was screwed. She remained irritated, saying that apparently he had become arrogant just because he sold properties, and that starting tomorrow he no longer needed to set foot in that place. Sheng began crying and knelt down, saying that he had elderly parents and children to support, as well as a mortgage and a car, and that his daughter was sick and needed expensive medicine. He tried to insist even more, saying that she knew his situation very well and that he could not lose his job. Wan Ying emphasized that he should have thought about that before because they ran a business and not a charity, and it was better for him to reflect on his actions. He tried to beg the protagonist, saying that he had been wrong to judge him by his appearance and asking for another chance. Irene was already trembling, thinking that she would probably be next, and now she did not know what to do. Xinguang looked at Irene and told the director that this sales agent was very good, so she should be the new manager. Wan Ying smiled and said that she would do as he asked because there was no problem with that and asked if he would like to see the property. Sheng could not believe what he had just heard, and Irene was also shocked. Xinguang said that it was already getting very late and asked if they could really still see the property. The director said yes, and that she would personally take him there. Irene was still so shocked that she could barely move, asking herself if she had really just been promoted and whether this had to be a dream. The system told the protagonist that he was brave and very just, fighting against discrimination and ensuring justice, and the reward was a heart. He became confused and asked the system what a heart was for because he wanted more practical rewards. The system said that it was a personal compliment and that he should not underestimate the system's personal compliments because they could be useful at crucial moments. Xinguang began to smile, thinking that apparently the system even made jokes. In the courtyard leading to the villa entrance, the gates opened, and the director said that those were the villa staff, responsible for all security and property management. All of them welcomed the new master. Wan Ying asked him to follow her to set things up with the automatic gate recognition system, because it would be quick. She picked up a briefcase full of documents saying that all the property certificates and other documents had been prepared for him and that he could review them whenever he wanted. He looked at the documents and thought that a luxury property worth 300 million was a lot, because he was just a nobody from the countryside who had never seen such an expensive property before, so it would be good to take a look at those documents. As soon as he held the certificate in his hands, he stared at it and thought that the certificate definitely looked premium. He tossed everything back into the briefcase and asked the director to show him the way. She was surprised by that, but thought that this was expected of a magnate because he did not even bother looking at the deed of a 300 million property. She showed the way and said that he should be the first to enter. She continued explaining that they had hired incredible landscapers specifically for the design of that villa's private garden. The interior had been decorated by a renowned international designer. She kept observing him, thinking that the protagonist was a low-profile magnate who treated money like nothing, and must be the young master of some secret family, probably afraid of exposing himself too much, drawing attention to the family, or ending up being kidnapped. Xinguang looked at the garden and thought that indeed the landscape was very beautiful, but considering his parents' preferences, he probably needed to plant a vegetable garden for the yard. Planting some cabbages and eggplants would make his parents like it a little more and feel more at ease. He continued looking around and thought that this was expected of a luxury residential area, but it would be even better if there were green beans or yellow melons planted there. Wan Ying said that if he was dissatisfied with anything, they could contact the designers to make modifications. Xinguang said that he would think about it for a while. He thought that he definitely needed some changes and that there were many impractical things because his parents would not feel comfortable that way. The system announced arrogance and emphasized that the host had found several reasons to dislike a 300 million property in just 1 minute, so he should not hold back anymore because he had just received a reward of 999 bonus points, and the system had also unlocked a new appearance. Xinguang was impressed seeing that the system had even come with an appearance change. The system explained that when the host advanced to a new stage of life, the system also updated accordingly. Wan Ying thought that not even the landscaping created by the best landscapers had managed to satisfy him completely, and this was indeed the attitude of someone from a prestigious family. She began laughing and said that he was acquiring the crown jewel of that district and was still very young in age, so it was clear that his future would truly be limitless. She emphasized that the CEO had heard about his generous payment and had especially instructed all of them to treat him very well, saying that he would pay him a visit when he returned from his business trip. Xinguang said that she did not need to worry about that because he had not spent much, and it was nothing worth making a fuss over. This made her even more surprised, and with a smile she explained that this was their duty, because they very much hoped he would support them again in the future. But deep inside she was almost going crazy, thinking that he had casually spent 300 million and was saying that it was not much. This made her question what kind of mysterious family that boy belonged to. A little farther ahead, they finally arrived at the house, and she asked him to enter. Somewhere else, a girl was playing with some things and asked her uncle Zhang who had bought that property. Zhang said that it was a young gentleman with the surname Hang, and that apparently he seemed to be only in his early 20s. She was surprised, and the butler asked if she would like them to search that boy's background. But she said there was no need, because someone capable of casually spending 300 million on a property certainly was not an ordinary person. And if they investigated him, the protagonist might end up finding out immediately, and it would not be good to offend him that way. She asked him to select a suitable gift to pay him a visit another day. A grand celebration was taking place because, after 3 months of preparation, Duojin Media was finally open for business. Xinguang sincerely thanked the director for the great effort in training all of them over the past few months, and everyone had to work hard because the rewards would not disappoint their efforts. The other girls who had also been hired shouted, saying that they would not disappoint him and that they would work hard. Xinguang and Gao Wen looked at each other happily at the start of a new empire. 3 months earlier, Gao Wen had been a little confused, asking if she really would not need to do live streams. The protagonist explained to her that a great resource needed to be used in the correct place. At the moment, they did not have quality employees, so they needed to prioritize recruiting and training new talent, and half of the profits from the new streamers would go directly to her. Gao Wen was surprised and asked if that was not too generous. Xinguang emphasized that she was the founding heroine of Duojin. Besides, experience was needed in every field, and she was the most familiar with the live streaming process. She understood the concept of operations and knew how to attract attention. Without her, he could not do all of this. But once the company stabilized, if she wanted to return to working in front of the camera, there would be no problem at all. Gao Wen said that this time she preferred to stay behind the cameras and not expose herself. At work, Shui noticed something on his phone and found Duojin Media's account. He was impressed to see that they had signed a fairly large number of streamers. But he kept mocking the situation and emphasized that nowadays those who started low were not very good. Besides, apparently they really thought starting a company like that was easy. So he wanted to know what that company had to compete with him. Suddenly, a man entered Shui's office saying that this company called Duojin Media was right across the street and questioning what the meaning of that was and whether it was just to confront them. Shui called the man cousin and asked if he had already returned from his trip and whether his sisters-in-law were doing well, emphasizing that he had just been thinking about how to destroy that company to ease some of his worries. The man laughed, saying that it was just the same and that they needed to show that company who ruled that industry. Shui acted like a true dog on a leash and clapped his hands, saying that he understood. Meanwhile, inside his office, the protagonist was looking at some landscapes on his tablet, saying that designers nowadays only thought about style with no substance. He had received ideas from 3 or 4 of them, and all of them were horrible. Apparently, his 300 million property needed to be luxurious and creative enough. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door and the protagonist asked them to enter. Gao Wen entered, saying that all the streamers had received a PK invitation from the Meow group all at the same time, and at least all of the opponents had 1 million followers and worked in the same field. She showed the messages in the work group and all the girls were saying the same thing, asking what they should do. Xingwang laughed, asking if this was that old trick, because apparently big streamers with millions of followers were going after girls with only a few thousand, and that was very shameful. He thought that his former company was stirring up conflict between the two companies only to encourage cyberbullying against the small streamers, an old tactic to show that they were the big company in the market. And this was indeed a good strategy, but it was a pity that they had picked a fight with the wrong guy. The protagonist asked if PK was ultimately just about spending money, and told all the streamers to accept the challenge. Gao Wen asked if he was thinking of spending money by sending rockets to the newcomers. Xingwang laughed and asked if that seemed a little extravagant. She remembered what had happened to her and thought that the one who helped in times of need could have been Xingwang. The protagonist explained that money, in the end, was only money when it was spent. If it stayed still in his hand, it was just numbers. Gao Wen said that even so, he should spend wisely. After all, almost half of the donations went to the streaming platform. She thought that he had already spent tens of millions on her contract termination, and if her guess was correct, he had spent several more millions sending rockets to her back then. And even with a lot of money, he could not keep acting that way. But Xingwang remained excited, saying that life was very short. People came into this world with nothing and would leave it with nothing as well, so there was no reason to save so much. Besides, this was not money being spent for nothing, it was an investment. Because he needed hype like this, since as long as they managed it well, the company would immediately make a name for itself in the industry. The idea of rookie streamers defeating giants in that field was incredible. The audience would clearly be curious about how that was possible and would come running after them. Besides, he emphasized that she should trust her own ability to find and train new talent a little more. As long as people entered the live streams and most of them stayed, they would win. Because of that, she should not worry because he knew his limits and would make sure she made money reliably and safely. Gao Wen thought that the protagonist's perspective was different from hers, because he had been spending a few hundred million, and spending a few more million would not make any difference to him. Besides, he had already handled operations for the Meow group before, so she definitely could not compare to him in marketing strategy. Since he trusted her, then she should trust him too. Gao Wen went over to all the girls and they asked what they should do, because if they accepted the challenge, they would definitely lose. But Gao Wen, like a true coach and director, asked all of them to accept the challenge. The protagonist picked up his phone and began looking at the battle between the two companies. In the company group, some people were sending messages, asking if everyone was watching the battle between those two companies, and questioning what Duojin was thinking, because with such low support, they were going to lose. The rope always ends up snapping on the weakest side. But Xingwang's true concern was whether he should choose a more Hawaiian style or a slightly more vintage style. Gao Wen entered the room saying that the votes in the battle were off the charts because they had come prepared, and she had let the big spenders focus on those battles today. She emphasized that all the accounts were ready and the funds were set aside. Because of that, she wanted to know when they would make their move. Xingwang asked her not to be in such a hurry because it was not the right time yet. They needed to preserve their strength a little longer. He explained that she needed to wait for the peak of viewership, when the mockery was at its highest, and only then would they make their move. Gao Wen laughed and said that she understood, but emphasized that she was a little impatient. Xingwang explained that the mental preparation of the girls they had hired was crucial. He asked her to make sure they all remained calm until the end, because they needed to be at their best, and he would reward everyone who performed well. Meanwhile, Shui already had champagne in his hand, saying that victory was guaranteed, so they could celebrate early. He thought that it did not matter that they had lost Gao Wen, because they could still make millions in a short period of time. The real boss asked what there was to celebrate because that was only a small company and this had been expected. He thought that even though they were making a lot of money, breaking the contract with their #1 streamer and letting her escape was still a huge loss. He received a message, and someone said that he had just remembered that the girl was the streamer Gao Wen, because he had heard that someone had paid the multi-million contract termination fee so she could leave, and now he could not believe that she had created her own company. It made sense that the average level of Duojin streamers was so high, and maybe that attack had been premeditated. The man became a little irritated, asking what this was and questioning why the manager had not warned him that Gao Wen had gone to Duojin. Shui thought that he could not let him discover that he had simply let that girl escape. He tried to smooth over the situation, saying that she had made a rich guy fall in love with her and pay the contract penalty. She had probably gotten too full of herself after receiving a few million in tips, thinking that she could become a boss lady or something like that. The boss said that it was fine as long as the manager had the overall situation under control, because they needed to win today's battle. Suddenly, someone opened the door in desperation, calling Boss He and saying that there was more news because the rivals were flooding the streamers with rockets and massive donations. Shui could not believe that this was happening again, because last time they had done this by focusing on one streamer, but now they were doing it with 10 at the same time, and because of that, he could not understand where so much money was coming from. He told the boss that they were clearly using fake accounts, because they had already exceeded 30 million in profit, so how could they surpass that? And even for someone who spent a lot, who would spend 30 million on a streamer? But the boss remained irritated and said that they could not lose this under any circumstances, asking if the manager understood. Shui asked his boss not to worry because it was probably just a wave of donations, and it would not last. But another employee began trembling, looked at him, and said that it had started again because they were once again donating a gigantic amount. The boss remained irritated and asked the manager if that was really just a wave. He ordered Shui to crush the rivals immediately. Meanwhile, inside the office, Gao Wen was watching the protagonist donate his money, unable to believe how he was spending. But the more he spent, the more the system congratulated him for spending and gave him consecutive million-level rewards. Gao Wen remained worried about the money and said that they were already winning, questioning why he needed to spend so much. She thought that the other side did not even have donation bars anymore and remembered exactly what had happened to her. And clearly, it had been the protagonist who had donated that to her. Besides, he had not even changed accounts, because the donor's name was exactly the same as the one that had sent donations to her. However, she thought that these numbers were already far too high, beyond what a second-generation heir from a rich family could spend. He sent another donation wishing prosperity, with 5,000 rockets all at once, and laughed, saying that they had never seen that much real money before because now it was time to show them how it was done. Gao Wen looked at the phone and thought that this was much more than just showing off. He called her, and she stood up ready. He asked her to always remember that they were aiming for only one goal, which was to reach the top, where no one would be able to compete. She said that she understood the purpose exactly. He said that now it was fine and that she could go raise the team's morale. Besides, she needed to remember never to forget the bet with the Meow group. He sat back down in his chair, thinking that this was the style of his dreams. He had finally managed to find the design he wanted. Nothing Hawaiian, French, or whatever else. This was the style he truly wanted. He decided to check how much he had received in system rewards from this little game. He began adding up the calculations and reached 10 billion, and that was exactly what he expected from that kind of system. Several traditional media offices were in an uproar. A woman shouted at her team that she wanted every piece of information about the protagonist company within 1 minute. The same thing was happening at another company, where the boss told his team that they needed to focus on the protagonist company because they had to obtain first-hand information. The entire team needed to make sure they secured an exclusive interview with them because he had already thought of the headline, "The Ant That Shook the Tree," the succession battle between old and new companies. The impact was so great that it even reached the streaming platform's company. During a meeting, one of the people present pointed out that in a single night, that company had created a miracle, with every streamer under its management gaining an average of 2 million followers. The head of the meeting was also amazed, saying that it was definitely the biggest sensation since the platform was founded. Therefore, they needed to contact the company immediately because he wanted to negotiate with them personally. Meanwhile, at Dujin Media, the protagonist streamers announced to the audience that the day's live stream was ending and thanked everyone for the gifts and support they had received. As soon as they ended their broadcast, they collapsed from exhaustion. Xing Wang approached them, and they happily said that they had never expected to actually win the competition, especially since they had been facing Shan Wang. They had been very frightened at the beginning of the contest, but everything had worked out in the end. The protagonist informed them that the revenue earned that day would be divided according to the percentages stipulated in their contracts. They became even happier and said that he was extremely generous because they had never imagined becoming rich in a single night. The system rewarded the protagonist, saying that the host was so generous that sharing the wealth had made the system feel ashamed, so the reward was 500. Xingwang complained to the system that the reward amounts fluctuated so much that they were enough to make anyone anxious. Gao Wen simply watched the beginning of their great success and smiled happily at the outcome. At Meow Media Group, the real boss was furious, while Shui looked somewhat frightened. They were reading the comments, which only made the boss angrier. Suddenly, a woman opened the door and said that they should give up the company's name. Dujin Media was already mass posting clips from the live streams and tagging them, demanding that they change their company name. As soon as she saw the boss's expression and realized that he was about to explode, she quickly closed the door. Once she left, the boss slapped Shui across the face and demanded to know whether this was what he called just a small wave. Shui had claimed that people would not give that girl much money, but 500 million was still 500 million. If it had not been for a useless person like Shui, how could Meow Media Group have become a laughingstock? They were practically rubbing it in everyone's faces. Shui tried to ease the situation by saying that they had still made a considerable amount of money, but the boss dared him to say that again. If Gao Wen were still with their company, at least 100 million of that 500 million would have belonged to them, and all of it had happened in a single night. He sat down in his chair with a headache and said that the mysterious sponsor clearly wanted to support Gao Wen and was willing to spend an absurd amount of money on her. Therefore, if she were still at their company, all that money would have gone directly into the company's pockets. Shui tried to explain himself by saying that the protagonist had clearly looked like a penniless loser. However, the boss scolded him, saying that the wheel of fortune never stopped turning and that no one should ever underestimate the poor. Furthermore, Shui had been too blind to see that the protagonist was a man of immense wealth and status. The boss had also heard that Shui had caused Gao Wen a great deal of trouble while she was working there. She had been their golden goose, yet Shui had acted like an idiot and treated her badly. So it was no surprise that she had been forced to leave. Shui asked whether it was not actually the boss's fault for allowing everything to happen. This made the boss even more furious, and he kicked Shui out, ordering him to leave immediately. Meanwhile, at the protagonist's company, Gao Wen was somewhat worried about him and asked whether it was really alright to spend so much money. She had calculated a total of 5 billion, and after splitting several tens of millions with the streamers, they could still earn 1.8 billion. Xingwang explained that he had not actually spent that much. This left her utterly shocked, and she asked whether he truly believed that it did not count as spending a lot of money. She thought about how he had spent 400 million in the final round alone and realized that the world of the wealthy was indeed completely different from the world she lived in. The protagonist began explaining that he had deposited 200 million into the platform, while the rest had come from customer top-ups after their popularity increased. In addition, for the 200 million he had deposited, the platform had given them 100 million in promotional gifts that they could use later. If they rounded the figures, he had only spent a small amount. Gao Wen wondered whether that was really how rounding worked now. On the other hand, the protagonist also thought that he had never imagined the day would come when he would say that spending 200 million was not a lot of money. The protagonist continued explaining that the strategy was called sacrificing 1 to gain 10. He asked whether she had seen the media coverage and pointed out that other companies spent countless amounts of time and resources promoting a single top streamer. In contrast, they had managed to promote more than a dozen top streamers in a single night, surpassing countless companies. Exposure itself could also be considered money. He reminded her that he had already told her that her future would be bright, and he thanked her for working so hard to train the newcomers who were now able to seize these opportunities. She must also have heard the saying that success breeds success. Once someone becomes popular, people naturally begin to notice and appreciate their qualities, creating an endless positive cycle. Therefore, after all this commotion, their path to the top would become much easier. In addition, he intended to invest in variety shows and television dramas, giving all those newcomers opportunities to show their true brilliance to the world. Dujin Media would not remain merely a streaming company, it would become a company devoted to future talent, entertainment, and much more. His phone began ringing, and when he answered, the caller said that they were from the renovation company he had just hired. Xingwang told Gao Wen that he would leave the rest for her to handle because the renovation company had just called and he needed to supervise the remodeling of his new house. She should calculate the bonuses, but she did not need to be stingy and should remember to include her own share. As he had mentioned before, she could receive a percentage from every newcomer she had trained. His philosophy for making money was that when everyone was happy, they earned even more. So he did not want any shady nonsense happening inside the company. Gao Wen smiled happily and shouted that she understood and would take care of it immediately. A short while later, at the protagonist's house, Zhang was looking for him, but the place was in complete chaos because of the renovation. Xingwang was coordinating everything, telling the workers to leave the cement and bricks outside the courtyard while warning them to be careful because they could not damage the load-bearing walls. He heard someone behind him and turned around to see who it was. Zhang stepped closer and said that he had heard there were new neighbors, so he had decided to pay a visit. He apologized in advance for not bringing much, only a few products from the company where he worked, but he hoped that the protagonist would like them. Xinguang thought that the man truly looked like the butler of a wealthy family. He had a dignified and refined air, looking exactly like the butlers who appeared in television dramas. This made him think that perhaps he should also hire a butler whom he could trust with important tasks. The protagonist removed his gloves and apologized, saying that the house was under renovation and therefore extremely messy. He was also covered in dirt and probably looked rather ridiculous. Zhang apologized in return, saying that he was the one who should be sorry for appearing without warning and causing so much trouble. Since they were neighbors and would likely interact frequently, he had wanted to visit in advance so that they could help one another in the future. The protagonist accepted the gift and thought that wealthy neighborhoods truly were different. Even the butler was extremely polite and courteous. Moreover, the gift box looked quite substantial and was even decorated with silver and gold. The protagonist thanked the butler and said that he was being far too kind because helping one's neighbors was only natural. Once the work there was finished, he would definitely pay them a visit as well. Several hours later, the protagonist was already exhausted. He had been working for a long time without realizing it and needed a proper break. He then received a phone call from one of his friends, who said that their former classmates were holding a reunion that weekend, and asked whether he was free. His friend had heard that the girl he had once had a crush on at university would also be there. The protagonist thinks that class reunions are nothing more than occasions for people to compare themselves with one another. Back in college, he was the worst student in his class, and because of that, everyone always mocked him for being poor. As a small-time businessman, he was only ever invited to reunions as a background character, but this time would be different. He laughs and says that he accepts the invitation. His friend is surprised that the protagonist agreed so quickly and assumes it must be because that girl will be there. At the same time, at Zhao Zhao's house, the butler tells her that the protagonist is indeed very kind and polite and did not look down on him for being merely a butler. On the contrary, he showed him great respect. He even removed his dirty gloves and wiped his hands before accepting the gift box, and so far he seems like a good person. However, if she prefers, the butler can continue getting to know the protagonist gradually. He is personally supervising the renovation and gets along well with the workers. Zhao Zhao thanks him for the report, but suddenly she hears someone entering through the door. She is surprised and thinks it might be the protagonist, but when she turns around, she sees her brother with a new girlfriend. She becomes angry and scolds her brother, saying that she has warned him many times not to bring anyone into that house. Her brother asks what kind of attitude she is showing since the woman is her future sister-in-law. He says that he has already had enough fun and now wants to settle down, planning to marry Mengxi. The girl begins to cry and asks whether Zhao Zhao has some misunderstanding about her, but Zhao Zhao simply ignores her and walks away. Mengxi feels a little uncomfortable and asks whether she should leave, since Miss Zhao Zhao clearly does not seem happy to see her there. She does not want to affect the siblings' relationship, but Zhao Zhao's brother tells his girlfriend that his sister is merely being dramatic and temperamental, so she does not need to pay attention to it. Zhao Zhao becomes irritated by those comments, and her brother continues by reminding her of what their grandfather said. In order to inherit the family fortune, she needs to get married. So perhaps she is only acting this way because she is jealous of him. Zhao Zhao asks why she would be jealous when she has only just turned 20 and is far from thinking about marriage. Besides, she is not an opportunist like her own brother, willing to sacrifice her dignity merely for an inheritance. She asks whether her brother thinks just anyone can enter the Ping family, since marriage depends on their grandfather's approval and not simply on some random choice. Sometime later, outside Shenwei Restaurant, a high-end establishment, Gao Wen drops the protagonist off in the parking lot and says that she needs to deliver something to a client and will return in an hour. Xinguang gets ready and thinks that he has a very good feeling that he is going to make a lot of money that day. He looks across the street and sees some of his friends. The girl in red points in his direction and asks whether that is the protagonist getting out of a car worth approximately 8 million, wondering when he became so rich. The red-haired young man says that there is no way the protagonist could have bought such an expensive car by himself, so he must have found a wealthy woman. Someone like him could never earn that kind of money honestly. Another young man says that perhaps this is why he was so excited about the class reunion, acting as though he had struck gold. Furthermore, the wealthy woman he found was probably old and ugly, because otherwise, why would she choose someone like him? The girl says that it could be a rich older woman or even a wealthy old man, since people have become very open-minded these days. Xinguang walks over to them and asks what they're talking about and whether they are jealous because he found himself a rich woman while none of them managed to do the same, or perhaps they simply are not good enough to accomplish such a thing. The girl asks why she would be jealous of someone like him when she does not need anyone. The protagonist asks whether Wang Duo is serious and reminds her that she married a factory director. He remembers that she drove away the man's original wife and took her place. Duo becomes angry and asks what he is talking about, accusing him of constantly spouting nonsense. Suddenly, another car arrives and Zhao's brother gets out with Mengxi. Everyone is impressed, saying that a goddess has appeared and that she even has a protector, although he may be much more than a mere protector, because he is a young master of the Ping family and has already appeared in interviews. The young boy teases the protagonist, saying that he heard he only came because that goddess would be there. He asks why he does not go over and greet her and wonders what the problem is, or whether his wealthy girlfriend has put a leash on him. Xingwang greets Mengxi, and although she looks slightly embarrassed, she greets him in return. The protagonist explains that his wealthy girlfriend is not controlling, so his friends can say whatever they want. He also tells them that they can continue flattering that man because he is going inside first. As soon as he walks away, the others begin commenting that the protagonist is a duck trying to become a swan, and that he will only embarrass himself if he fails, since Mengxi is not someone he can dream of having. Zhao's brother leaves after telling his girlfriend to call him when she finishes eating so that he can return to pick her up. Duo says that the two of them look wonderful together and are enough to make anyone jealous. She asks when the wedding will be because she wants to be invited. Mengxi laughs and says that her boyfriend insisted on driving her there, even though he was busy, but now it is time to go upstairs. They enter the private room and begin celebrating while the protagonist sits alone, looking at his phone. One of the young men, the one who invited the protagonist, says that the economy has been rather difficult in recent years and that he only managed to buy one floor of the building across from City Hall. Everyone is impressed because a property there is worth tens of millions. Mengxi also shows off in front of her friends, saying that she is not capable of accomplishing anything that impressive because she will soon get married and become a housewife, which has actually always been her dream. The girls are once again amazed, especially since the young master of the Ping family is probably her fiancé and is extremely generous. However, Mengxi continues boasting while thinking that all her friends are nothing but a group of poor, jealous women. They can remain jealous because she is irresistible. Meanwhile, the protagonist looks at the notifications on his phone. He has been so busy recently that he had forgotten he donated a building to the hospital. Some people begin to notice his silence and ask why he is merely staring at his phone. Another young man says that perhaps he is so heartbroken that he is about to cry because the goddess is getting married. Xingwang asks why he would be sad. If she is getting married, then obviously he should congratulate and respect her. What else is he supposed to do about it? However, one of his friends tries to humiliate him by asking how someone who earns only $5,000 a month could possibly be so busy, claiming that he is actually just a salaried worker doing extra shifts on weekends. Xingwang puts away his phone and stands up, saying that he is indeed working overtime, mainly because he is trying to make the world a better place. Everyone begins laughing at him, saying that 2 years of excessive work must have driven him insane. He's no longer a child, so why is he behaving so immaturely? They suggest that perhaps he should work in construction because the boss there needs laborers, and nowadays even delivery drivers earn more than 5,000. This makes the protagonist slightly irritated, but his friends ask whether he cannot take a joke, saying that they are only trying to help because delivery work pays better than his current job. Xingwang merely smiles and says that it is very kind of them. He says goodbye and tells everyone to enjoy themselves and eat and drink as much as they like because his house is being renovated and the construction team has a question, so he needs to leave. His red-haired friend asks him not to leave yet because the food has only just arrived. He also asks where the protagonist bought his house and says that if it is in Sang City, they could visit after the renovation is finished for the housewarming party. However, his friend is only trying to make him stay so they can continue mocking him. The protagonist says that his house is very modest and small and that there would not be enough room for everyone. The other man begins laughing and says that it cannot possibly be in Sang City because even if the protagonist starved himself for 2 consecutive years, he would barely be able to afford a parking space in the worst part of the city. Therefore, they cannot expect everyone to squeeze into the protagonist's tiny apartment. Although the invitation is thoughtful, it would be better to spare him the embarrassment. The protagonist also laughs and says that this is exactly right because how could such a tiny place accommodate distinguished people like them? Duo tries to stop him from leaving by asking whether he is actually attempting to escape without paying his share of the bill, but the protagonist says that he can pay when they send the bill to the group chat. She continues shouting that a single bottle of wine there costs thousands. This is not some roadside restaurant. It is the Shenwei Hotel, one of the most sophisticated establishments in the city. If he leaves the group later, who will pay his share? The protagonist transfers 10,000 to them and asks whether that is enough, adding that they can simply let him know if it is not. This makes his friends continue mocking him, saying that stubborn pride never changes because he is the type of person who who would go bankrupt trying to impress others, and who knows how long it took him to save those 10,000. Duo tells him to stop because the bill will not reach 10,000, so there is no need to exaggerate. Mengxi stands up and says that he does not need to do that because she will pay his share and ask the manager not to accept his money. Everyone is impressed by her kindness. She continues by saying that 10,000 is far too much for him and that he should save it for his daily expenses. She laughs to herself, thinking that besides being extremely beautiful, she's also very generous. She tells one of her friends that he is nothing but an idiot and that if she had not needed to copy his homework, she would not even have looked at him back in school. All she has to do is smile at him and show him a little kindness, and he abandons his pride and starts wagging his tail for days. Someone like him is not even worthy of carrying her shoes. The protagonist thinks that if he did not know what kind of person she really was, he would probably be crying with gratitude right now. But he apologizes and says that he does not need those 10,000 and does not need her to pay the bill for him either. The girls become angry, saying that he is being extremely disrespectful and ungrateful. Another girl says that perhaps he is only worried that accepting her money would make him look inferior to her. Mengxi continues pretending to be the victim and tells them not to speak that way because the protagonist has also gone through many hardships. However, she admits that she is somewhat worried about his personality because he has always been very impulsive. Xingwang asks Mengxi whether she truly thinks she is some kind of divine savior just because people call her a goddess. He points out that he thought they would not need to become rude since they were old classmates, but apparently she has no shame at all. He says that he will pay for the meal himself. The young man who invited him pulls out a VIP card and says that he is not qualified because it is a VIP room and only VIP members can pay the bill. The protagonist calls over one of the employees and asks him to summon the manager because he would like to pay the bill. The employee explains that the manager is very busy and that only VIP members can pay the bill. The young man who invited the protagonist tells the employee to simply say that a VIP wants to speak with him. The employee agrees immediately, while the protagonist's friend thinks that he will soon humiliate himself. A few minutes later, the manager arrives. Xingwang asks whether it is true that only VIP cardholders can pay the bill for a VIP room. The manager says yes, and the protagonist replies that it is fine because he also wants a VIP card. Everyone starts laughing, saying that he is nothing but a country bumpkin who clearly understands nothing and thinks he can receive a VIP card for free. A minimum expenditure of 500,000 is required to qualify for the card, so this little performance will not work. Xingwang asks whether the minimum expenditure is 500,000 and then asks the manager how much it would cost to have those people thrown out. The manager explains that this is not a matter of money because the hotel values its guests and will not expel customers. All of his classmates continue laughing, saying that the protagonist has watched too many television dramas and now thinks he is some kind of tycoon. They point out that this is real life, and things do not work that way. However, Xingwang offers the manager 10 million. The manager is shocked. The protagonist returns to the table and begins eating, saying that he will pay 10 million, but he no longer wants the VIP card. The 10 million will simply cover the meal, but in exchange, he wants peace and quiet. The manager looks at the protagonist's clothes and thinks that he does not appear wealthy. Besides, no one would spend 10 million on a single meal. He walks over to the protagonist and says that even if this is meant as a joke, there still have to be limits. Xingwang simply asks the manager to process the card. Duo tells the protagonist that he should at least try to make his act look convincing and use a black card because there is no way that worthless card of his can process 10 million. The red-haired young man agrees, saying that if they look closely, the card is covered in scratches and has clearly been handled carelessly. If he were truly wealthy, he would never treat it that way. The others continue talking, pointing out that only moments ago he claimed that he had something urgent to do and needed to leave, yet now he is suddenly sitting down to eat, which proves that he was only making excuses. The female employee swipes the card through the machine while everyone says that this is becoming ridiculous and that they are literally watching a madman pretend to be rich. However, the woman tells the manager that the payment has actually been approved, leaving everyone stunned. Xingwang tells the manager that the payment has been completed and asks whether he can now eat in peace. The manager says yes and immediately orders everyone else to leave. The system is amazed and says that the host has leveled up, jumping from a 300,000 yuan meal to a 10 million yuan meal. Therefore, he must be congratulated for unlocking the achievement of treating money like mere numbers, and he is rewarded with 20 million. One of the protagonist's friends becomes angry and slams the table, saying that they are all former classmates, so how could he disregard their reputation and have them expelled? Another girl agrees, adding that many of them are influential people in the city, so if he goes too far, he may end up making enemies. Xingwang continues eating and says that he is not afraid of making enemies. From the moment he was invited to that reunion, everyone's intentions were impure. They only wanted to mock and insult him, looking down on him so that they could feel successful and inflate their own egos. Why were they not worried about making an enemy then? If they want to preserve their reputation, the solution is simple. They can also spend 10 million on a meal, which should be easy for them. Since they are all his former classmates, he will make the rules perfectly clear. Whoever can pay more than him will make him leave without saying a single word. It is simply a matter of who can spend more, so they are welcome to turn it into a competition. The girls say that perhaps they should let the matter go because it is only a meal and they can find another place to continue their gathering. After all, they were only irritated, while the protagonist had lost 10 million because a nouveau riche like him could not handle being in the spotlight. Suddenly, Mengxi's boyfriend arrives and says that he will pay 10 million and one. He asks whether they can leave now and tells his girlfriend not to worry because he is there. She leans against him and asks why he came back and whether this will interfere with his business, but he says that she is his priority. The girls are impressed to see the young master and say that the protagonist is finished now because he cannot compete with the wealth of the Ping family. That family has only one young master, the future head of the family, so they are eager to see how the protagonist will lose his dignity. However, Xingwang thinks that the man deliberately added only one to the original amount just to provoke him. Furthermore, the surname Ping sounds somewhat familiar because it is not a common name. He remembers that the butler who delivered the gifts that day said that the surname of the young lady who sent him there was Ping. The young master continues provoking the protagonist, asking why he has suddenly gone silent and whether he only had 10 million. He looks at his girlfriend and says that the other side does not appear very strong after all. She asks him not to say that, because the protagonist probably only got carried away for a moment. The young master looks impressed and says that she is very understanding. Xingwang explains that originally this was merely a matter between classmates, but if an outsider insists on interfering, then things are different. The protagonist thinks that he never expected another idiot to appear and help him earn so much money through the system. He takes out his card and asks the manager to add another 5 million. The manager nearly has a heart attack, wondering what is happening, but then realizes that this is probably a battle between titans and that he is the one profiting from it. The young master offers 15 million, but the protagonist raises the amount to 20 million. The young master raises it to 20 million and one. The system informs the protagonist that he has unlocked another achievement. The host has applied the logic of live stream donation battles to real life, so the system rewards him with 50 million. He must keep up the good work because if he stops, then the system will stop as well. They are in this together, and the protagonist will always have the system's support. Mengxi looks at her boyfriend and thinks that marrying a rich person saves her from many problems. But the protagonist says that he is already getting bored and offers 30 million. Everyone tells the young master to continue and not let that nobody overshadow him because he will certainly keep raising the bid and the protagonist cannot possibly compete with him. Mengxi looks at her boyfriend and notices that he has gone silent. She thinks that he cannot lose because if he does, she will lose her reputation as well. However, the young master is going crazy inside, wondering how that man could be insane enough to offer 30 million for a single meal. Originally, he had only wanted to invest in the restaurant and planned to pay the bill with his card before discussing his ownership stake with the board, but 30 million is beyond reason because he cannot simply print that much money. The protagonist's payment of 30 million is approved, and the manager asks whether there will be any further bids. The young master remains furious, thinking that everyone there is completely broke and that they certainly are not spending their own money. Besides, Mengxi was supposed to marry him and enter the family, but after this fiasco, how could he help save her reputation? Furthermore, he is not going to risk his family's name for a girl like her. Xingwang asks the young master what is wrong and whether he is not going to bid 30 million and one, just as he did the previous times. Suddenly, the young master's phone starts ringing and he tells the protagonist to wait because he needs to answer a call. Xingwang tells him to take his time because the food is getting cold, so he will eat while he waits. Zhao Zhao calls him and asks what he spent 20 million and one on and whether he invested it in the hotel, but he angrily tells her that it is none of her business and asks whether she has any other questions. Zhao Zhao explains that she did not want to get involved, but their grandfather had asked about it. This frightens the young master, who asks why their grandfather is paying attention to 20 million. She tells him that she is at the hotel and is about to enter the elevator so they can speak in person later. The young master angrily asks whether she has been following him, but she hangs up. He thinks that if she discovers his weakness, everything will be over. Xingwang approaches him and asks whether he has finished his call because it is his turn. The young master says that the protagonist is insane because the meal is worth 20,000 at most, and it is not as though he is dining with the Oracle of Omaha, so how could spending that much money possibly be worthwhile? He would have to be crazy to participate in a game like this. One of the people says that this would be a humiliation for his family, but the young master furiously orders him to shut up immediately and asks who he thinks he is to speak that way. The manager asks him to remain calm and discuss the matter politely, then asks whether he is withdrawing from the auction. Since they operate in good faith, they can fully refund any amount he has already paid. The young master looks at the manager and tells him to speak with his secretary. The protagonist continues mocking the situation, saying that it is extremely boring because he thought he would have a little more fun. He thinks that for a moment, he believed he had caught a big fish and would make a considerable profit, but in the end, it was not even as rewarding as the super rocket bonuses. Duo tells Mengxi that if she does nothing to help, they will all be humiliated, so she needs to act because she does not want to see everyone disgraced by the protagonist. Mengxi thinks that the entire situation is complete madness and that she should never have attended the class reunion. She tries to persuade her boyfriend by saying that many people are watching and that she's becoming embarrassed. The young master slaps her across the face and calls her a troublemaker because she was responsible for dragging him into the situation. He declares that their engagement is cancelled and that she should stay as far away from him as possible. Mengxi begins crying and asks whether he had not said that they would always be together and remain inseparable until the end of the world. She asks whether he is truly breaking up with her over something as insignificant as 30 million. Still furious, the young master asks how she dares call it insignificant when the reputation of the Ping family has been trampled upon. He says that he only liked her because of her appearance and good genes, so that they could have beautiful children. How could he possibly have truly loved her? He asks whether she thought he was an idiot, since he knows perfectly well that she was only interested in his money. When the protagonist realizes that there will be no further bids, he approaches the manager and asks whether he can finally eat in peace. The manager says yes and promises to clear the room immediately and ensure that he is not disturbed. Before leaving, the young master tells the protagonist that he hopes he's very lucky and never crosses paths with the Ping family again. But before he can leave, his sister opens the door and asks what he is talking about. She steps forward, grabs him by the shirt, and says that he had better explain in detail everything he did that day. She pushes her brother aside and tells the manager that her family would like to invest $2 billion in the hotel. Everyone is astonished, realizing that the young lady actually has far more influence than the young master. However, the question everyone is asking is who has won that round. Zhao asks the manager to clear the entire room because she has some business to discuss with the protagonist. The manager says that he will do so immediately and asks her to take a seat. Meanwhile, people begin wondering what kind of business could be important enough for the young lady of the Ping family to handle personally, and whether the protagonist might be a hidden big shot capable of overshadowing even the young master of that family. The red-haired young man who had previously tried to humiliate the protagonist thinks that he hid his true identity extremely well. Duo is also confused, wondering how a loser like him could possess so much money, and realizing that she should never have provoked him. Xingwang looks at Zhao and thinks that she is very interesting. The manager orders everyone to leave immediately, and Zhao informs her brother that their grandfather is waiting for him at home. Everyone is embarrassed and does not know what to say. The young master begins walking away and Mengxi runs after him, saying that everything was her fault and that she never expected any of this to happen, so she would like to ask for his forgiveness. However, Zhao interrupts her and says that if she wants to live peacefully in that city, she must never approach or provoke the Ping family again. Terrified, Mengxi runs away while the young master remains silent and leaves. The manager announces that they will immediately serve fresh dishes to the honored guests so they can remain inside and enjoy their privacy. Zhao smiles, approaches the protagonist, and says that they can now speak in peace. In the hotel's private room, Xingwang greets Zhao and says that it is a pleasure to meet her. She then asks whether Mr. Wang received the gift she sent, explaining that it was only a small gesture of gratitude and nothing significant. Xingwang confirms that he received it and comments that he had planned to finish the renovations before visiting her family. Zhao replies that she actually came to apologize for the incident that day. She explains that her older brother has always been that way and that the family wanted her to keep him under control, but not even she could manage him. Therefore, she sincerely apologizes for him offending Xingwang and asks him not to take those words to heart. Zhao says that the Ping family is not unreasonable and does not like using its social status to mistreat others. She makes it clear that she did not come to the Shenwei Hotel to create a conflict with Xingwang. She simply did not want her brother's actions to tarnish the family's reputation, especially if anything about the incident were leaked. She asks him to understand the situation and consider it as the Ping family owing him a favor. She then raises her glass and drinks to it. Xingwang replies that since they are neighbors, it is only natural for them to help each other. But he asks what kind of business Miss Zhao Zhao wanted to discuss by inviting him there. Zhao Zhao admits that the business discussion was only an excuse. The real reason was to remove everyone from the room, including her brother, as politely as possible. According to her, the two of them should remain there for an hour or two before leaving. Xingwang becomes confused and asks whether they are simply going to sit there. Thinking to himself, he concludes that Miss Zhao Zhao truly does not follow conventional rules. With little to talk about, Zhao Zhao suggests that perhaps they could start eating, since the meal was extremely expensive. Xingwang asks her to sit down and wonders whether she prefers to remain standing. However, Zhao Zhao replies that he does not need to worry about her because this is his lunchtime. Xingwang finds this strange and wonders whether she is truly planning to sit there and simply watch him eat. Meanwhile, Zhao Zhao observes that the food is good and thinks that at least he is not a picky eater. Still uncomfortable, the protagonist wonders why the girl seems so strange and asks whether she is certain there is nothing she wants to say. Zhao Zhao replies that they have only just met and are not exactly acquaintances, so she does not know what they should talk about. Xingwang admits that her reasoning makes sense, but sitting there like that is extremely awkward. At that moment, his phone rings, and he says that he needs to answer it. On the other end, Gao Wen says that she has finished her tasks, is parking the car, and asks which private room her boss is in. Xingwang replies that he is in one of the suites on the second floor. After hanging up, he thinks that the call could not have come at a better time, because the situation was becoming so uncomfortable that he almost wanted to dig a hole in the floor and hide in it. Moments later, Xingwang announces that his friend has arrived. Gao Wen enters enthusiastically and asks how the food is, but she quickly notices the strange situation and asks whether he was not supposed to be attending a class reunion, since only he and Zhao Zhao are there. Zhao Zhao remains silent for a moment before standing up and saying that she still has some business waiting for her, so she will take her leave. Xingwang becomes confused, thinking that they were supposed to remain there for 2 hours before leaving. Gao Wen also finds it strange, wondering why Zhao Zhao left as soon as she arrived, and asks her boss whether he was not supposed to be with his former classmates and where everyone went. Gao Wen asks whether Zhao Zhao was one of his classmates, but Xingwang says no. He then explains that the story of what happened that day is rather long. After hearing the explanation, Gao Wen focuses on the table full of food and comments that it is absurdly expensive, saying that she has never eaten anything so extravagant. She is shocked to learn that the meal cost 30 million and says that although they definitely cannot make it worth the price, not finishing it would be a complete waste. Gao Wen complains that wealthy people treat money like trash, and Xingwang replies that if she stays around him, she will see many more situations like that. He then asks what the client said. Gao Wen explains that the merchandise agreement has been finalized and that the commission rates were much better than she expected. She says that they have already selected several of the company's streamers to focus on merchandise sales, since that is the current trend in live streaming. In addition, she hired several writers to create content for their posts. Xingwang comments that having Gao Wen work only as a streamer before was truly a waste of her talent. Upon hearing this, Gao Wen remembers the malicious remarks she heard in the past, with people saying that her dress was provocative, that streamers merely sold themselves, that she pretended to be something she was not, that she dressed that way to seduce men, and that she had been used by many people. Thinking about those humiliations, Gao Wen reflects that if it had not been for her family's circumstances, who would willingly choose to become a borderline streamer? Emotional, she says that if it were not for Xingwang, she would never have received this opportunity, and she tells him that she is truly grateful for the chance he gave her. Gao Wen says that he brought light into her life and showed her that she could be more than a streamer created to flirt in the eyes of the public. Now, she could become someone who truly shone in people's hearts, while also earning the respect of business partners and brands. Xingwang replies that this is only the beginning and that her future will be even brighter. He says that he hopes they will continue working together and achieve even greater success. The two then raise their glasses and toast to a successful partnership. Shortly afterwards, Xingwang reminds her that she should still eat because the meal cost a fortune. Gao Wen enthusiastically agrees, and the two continue enjoying the food. Outside the hotel, several people are admiring a sports car parked near the entrance. A black-haired man is impressed and comments that it is the latest model, equipped with a 3.8-liter twin-turbocharged 6-cylinder engine. According to him, even the basic configuration of that type of high-performance car costs around 3 million. His friend in the green shirt asks whether he likes that kind of car, but the man asks whether he looks like someone who could afford one. A brown-haired woman is also delighted, saying that the car is beautiful and that the way its door opens is extremely cool. At that moment, a man wearing a gold chain sees Gao Wen and approaches her, saying that it is quite a coincidence. Gao Wen recognizes him as Mr. Zhang and asks what he is doing there. Zhang Wencheng replies that he naturally heard about her changing jobs and says that it is perfectly fine that she left Miao Group. He adds that if her startup needs money, she can contact him at any time. He then asks where she is going and offers her a ride. Gao Wen refuses, saying that she still has something to do afterward. However, Zhang insists, saying that since she has something to do, he can take her there, wait outside, and then, once she finishes, they can go eat something and have fun together. Gao Wen thanks him but refuses again. Deep down, Zhang feels frustrated, thinking that he was her top donor for so long, yet she still has not given him a single chance. He remembers telling his friends that he would win Gao Wen over that month, but now he seems to have lost before even beginning. He also thinks that he drove his 3 million yuan sports car there for nothing. At that moment, Xingwang appears and asks Gao Wen whether the man is her friend. Gao Wen explains that he is Zhang Wencheng, a donor who frequently sent her many gifts when she worked at Miao Group. Xingwang greets the man and introduces himself as Gao Wen's colleague. The protagonist then tells Gao Wen that they should leave, and she agrees enthusiastically. Before departing, she says goodbye to Mr. Zhang. When he sees the two of them get onto an electric scooter, Zhang Wencheng is incredulous and mocks the protagonist, wondering whether that loser truly believes he can compete with him while riding such a terrible electric scooter. He also thinks that the man should take a look at himself in the mirror. Afterward, Zhang remembers that it is rare for his wife to be away on a business trip, meaning that he finally has a peaceful day to himself and cannot waste the opportunity. He takes out his phone and calls another woman. On the other end, Xinuo answers and says that brother Zhang has finally remembered her. Zhang asks whether she still wants to eat crayfish and says that he knows an excellent place, promising to pick her up. Xinuo becomes excited, says that he is the best, and tells him that she is already heading out. Meanwhile, Xingwang drives the scooter with Gao Wen sitting behind him and comments that for short distances, using an electric scooter is much more convenient, especially with the traffic being so terrible. Gao Wen agrees and says that according to the map, the restaurant is just around the corner. Xingwang comments that the food there is delicious and that people need simple things, such as simple food. Excited, he says that they are going to devour those crayfish that day. At the restaurant, the waiter serves one plate with garlic flavor and another, seasoned with 13 spices, saying that they can order more if it is not enough. Xingwang asks whether he can also bring them a plate of noodles, and the waiter replies that it will be ready very quickly. Excited, Gao Wen says that she's not going to wear gloves and immediately starts eating with her hands. She comments that the crayfish heads should be quite large and reminds Xingwang not to forget to suck the heads. The protagonist laughs and says that she really knows how to eat them. The two then raise their glasses and begin enjoying the meal. Shortly afterward, Xinuo arrives at the restaurant with Zhang Wencheng and notices Gao Wen and Xingwang there. She realizes that it is them and tries to avoid the situation by suggesting that brother Zhang take her to another restaurant. However, Zhang replies that the place is excellent and that they will stay there. When he notices Gao Wen with Xingwang, Zhang becomes irritated and realizes that her excuse about having something else to do was merely a way to reject his invitation. In his eyes, Gao Wen is actually on a date with that loser. Xinuo calls out to him, but Zhang is lost in his own thoughts. Furious, he thinks that Gao Wen should wait and see because he will support another girl and become someone else's top donor. Xinuo is also provoked and thinks that Gao Wen is acting arrogantly just because she managed to hook a rich man like Xingwang. She concludes that she can also steal Gao Wen's #1 donor and that, with brother Zhang's support, her new account will have no trouble becoming popular. On the other side of the table, Gao Wen watches the situation and comments that Zhang Wencheng is a scumbag, asking whether she should warn Chu Xinuo. Xingwang merely replies that everyone reaps what they sow. Gao Wen thinks for a moment and ultimately remains silent. Meanwhile, Xinuo sits down with Zhang, praises the smell of the food and says that she will peel the crayfish for him. Zhang accepts and comments that Xinuo is a wonderful girl. She intimately brings the food to his mouth, but before the situation can continue, a furious woman appears and shouts Zhang Wencheng's name, demanding to know what he is doing. Zhang Wencheng realizes that his girlfriend has arrived and tries to escape the situation, but Lin Lin does not fall for his excuse and confronts him, asking whether he took advantage of her business trip to cheat on her. Zhang tries to explain, saying that it is not what she thinks. Deep down, he believes that Lin Lin is normally easy to deceive, and that a few sweet words will be enough to convince her again. Lin Lin then looks at Xinuo and asks whether she did not know that he had a girlfriend. Xinuo becomes embarrassed, thinking that this had to happen there of all places, and in front of Gao Wen as well. Lin Lin then grabs Zhang Wencheng and begins listing everything she has done for him. She says that she bought his cars, watches, and houses, and even gave him a monthly allowance, asking whether she was still not good enough. Furious, she accuses Zhang of cheating on her with a mistress and asks whether a dog ate his morals. Zhang begs her to listen and claims that he is the victim, insisting that the woman forced herself on him. Lin Lin then turns on Xinuo, calls her a bitch, and asks whether she was trying to steal her man. Zhang takes advantage of the situation and continues lying, saying that he is innocent, that Xinuo seduced him, and that his feelings for Lin Lin are genuine. Xinuo tries to deny it but begins to understand the truth. Zhang Wencheng is not a wealthy young master at all, but merely a gigolo supported by a rich woman. Lin Lin asks whether he truly has feelings for her, and Zhang repeatedly confirms it, saying that she knows how he has always treated her. Lin Lin then demands that he prove he was seduced. To save himself, Zhang slaps Xinuo across the face. Shocked, she asks whether he has lost his mind. However, Zhang accuses her of approaching him merely to get free food and drinks, saying that she insisted that he pay for dinner and even rejected several dresses, yet still had the nerve to act like a victim. Xinuo denies it, saying that he is slandering her, and insists that she did not know he had a girlfriend, which means that she is also a victim. Suddenly, the protagonist stands up, and as she watches the scene, Gao Wen thinks that for someone who talked about respecting other people's lives, Zhang is a complete hypocrite. Xing Wang decides to intervene, and Zhang asks what that failure is trying to do. The protagonist throws food in his face and tells Zhang to go to hell. Xinuo is surprised to see Xing Wang while Zhang screams in pain and says that his eyes are burning. Lin Lin asks who the hell he is and what any of this has to do with him. Xing Wang replies that both of them are shameless and tells Lin Lin to keep her little plaything under control instead of embarrassing herself in public. Lin Lin becomes angry, but deep down, she feels that the insult hit the mark. Furious, Zhang Wenqing threatens to kill Xing Wang. The protagonist replies that he is curious to see how Zhang intends to do that. Xinuo is shaken and thinks that Xing Wang is willing to fight others to protect her. She remembers how often she used to mock him and wonders whether she might be imagining things. Zhang breaks a bottle and charges forward, saying that he will kill him, but Xing Wang stares him down without retreating and asks whether he thinks he can use him as a doormat. When the idiot tries to hit him, he simply drives a brutal knee into him, sending him flying. The protagonist then mocks Lin Lin, asking whether, despite being a wealthy woman, she cannot find a plaything with even a little self-control. He adds that at least dogs are loyal to their owners, while her little plaything is worse than a completely useless stray. Lin Lin remains silent and, despite the situation, ends up thinking that Xing Wang is quite handsome. As Xing Wang prepares to leave, Xinuo calls out to him and asks him to wait. The protagonist asks what she wants this time, and she says that since he helped her that day, she would like to treat him to dinner as thanks. Xing Wang refuses, but Xinuo insists and also tries to apologize for what happened before. He replies that he did not help her intentionally and merely found Zhang Wencheng irritating, so she does not need to take it so seriously. Besides, Gao Wen and he still need to return to the company and work overtime, so it would be better to leave the matter there. Even so, Xinuo is touched and thinks that he is humble and calm, wondering why she had been so blind before. To her, Brother Hong is a good man, one in a million. As she watches the two of them leave, Xinuo realizes that Xing Wang and Gao Wen seem to be only friends, and begins wondering whether she still has a chance. At that moment, the restaurant manager asks who will cover the damages. Lin Lin tries to get rid of Zhang Wencheng while he clings to her and says that he cannot live without her and will die if she abandons him. Furious, Lin Lin tells the manager to charge that scumbag for everything and orders Zhang to disappear. With no other option, Zhang thinks that since Lin Lin no longer wants him, Chu Xinuo is at least an internet celebrity and must have plenty of money. Since he considers himself handsome, he tries to call out to her, but Xinuo immediately warns him that if he dares harass her again, she will call the police. Zhang tries to say that he was wrong, but she gives him no chance. On the way back, Gao Wen comments that, just like at the crayfish restaurant, Xing Wang could not stop himself from helping someone again. The protagonist explains that he realized Zhang Wencheng had harassed Gao Wen before, so his main goal was to remove that threat from her. Gao Wen thanks boss Hang and jokes that at this rate, she will have to work for him forever just to repay the debt. She then shows him the new project she prepared. Gao Wen explains that the company's social media presence is growing, but relying only on live streams is becoming limiting. Therefore, she plans to have the streamers participate in short dramas, using that format to create memorable characters and strengthen their personal brands. Even if the profit margin is not particularly high, the overall return could be substantial because of the popularity, and that income would also help them secure financing for larger projects. Xing Wang replies that if she believes it will work, then they should do it. He decides to produce a project and personally handle the investment. Gao Wen becomes concerned, thinking that she cannot allow the company to take that kind of financial risk, and tries to remind him that there is still money in the company's account. However, Xingwang interrupts her and says that using company funds for the new venture would be too risky, so he will use his own money. Gao Wen finds this strange and says that using his personal money would be even riskier, but the protagonist simply replies that it is fine because money comes and goes. At that moment, the system chimes and announces that it has been deeply moved by the host's selflessness in supporting the company, rewarding Xingwang with 5,550,000 so that the venture can reach new heights. Relieved, Xingwang thinks that it is a good thing he acted quickly, or else his daily salary would have slipped away. Gao Wen is left speechless. Afterward, he says that he needs to go home because the renovations are still underway, and he also tells Gao Wen not to work overtime for too long, reminding her that her health is the most important thing. She agrees, still somewhat surprised. Later that night, Xingwang rides his scooter through a residential area and hears someone shouting at a woman to leave. Finding the late-night commotion strange, he approaches and sees Mengxi being thrown out by Taihei. Crying, she asks whether Taihei is truly going to be so cruel, reminding him that he said he would marry her and asking whether all of it was a lie. Taihei coldly replies by asking whether she truly does not know whether she wanted to marry him for love or for money. He tells Mengxi to stop bothering him and leave immediately, saying that he does not want to lose his shares in the Ping family because of her. When she continues insisting, Taihei threatens to call security. Mengxi eventually falls to the ground and begins crying, unable to understand why any of this is happening. Xingwang quietly approaches and hands her a tissue. She looks at him and asks whether he came to laugh at her. The protagonist replies that she is overthinking it because he was merely passing by. Mengxi finds that strange and asks whether he came to the wealthy neighborhood on business. But Xingwang explains that his new house is being renovated and that he came to check on it. Upon hearing this, she is surprised and asks whether that mansion belongs to him. Xingwang replies that it belongs to his family, although it would also be fair to say that he bought it. Mengxi becomes even more confused, remembering that earlier at the restaurant, he had confronted the owner on equal terms. And now it turned out that he had also bought the best building in the complex. To her, Xingwang seemed to have become unbelievably successful in secret during the 2 years since graduation. Mengxi wonders how anyone could become so wealthy in only 2 years and begins to suspect that he might come from a rich family. However, she quickly dismisses the idea, remembering that he appeared extremely poor in college. She then asks whether Xingwang is angry with her. The protagonist replies that he has no reason to be angry. Deep down, he feels that the conversation is beginning to become dangerous. Mengxi says that he pursued her for so long in college, yet the two of them never truly talked. She recalls that everyone used to mock him, but now he does not hold a grudge, which makes her happy. Xingwang cuts her off and says that she is misunderstood. Mengxi tries to continue, saying that she only wants to clear things up, but the protagonist replies that he does not think it is necessary. At that moment, the system announces that the host has refused to be a simp, praises his determination and noble attitude, and rewards him with 10,000 yuan. Xingwang realizes that this also counts as a noble attitude and understands that firmly rejecting someone can earn him rewards, so he decides to continue. Mengxi says that she has a great deal to tell him and asks whether he cannot listen to her patiently like he used to. However, Xingwang steps back and warns that men and women should maintain a proper distance. He makes it clear that he only helped her because they were classmates, and that if she believes he still has feelings for her, she is mistaken. The protagonist admits that he used to chase after her, but that does not mean he still feels anything. The system sounds again saying that the host has been sincere, and that admitting his past is admirable. According to the system, having once been a simp was merely part of his journey, and because he continues moving firmly toward the future, Xingwang receives another 50,000 yuan. Encouraged by this, the protagonist continues saying that Mengxi was rejected by Ping Taihei, failed to become the fiancé of the Ping family, and has now decided to seek him out as though he were really that pathetic. Xingwang says that he pursued her because he loved her, but that is now in the past and she needs to move on. He says that Mengxi enjoyed watching him chase after her and that he knew it, but ignored it because he was in love. Now that he no longer feels anything, she means nothing to him and is merely a stranger who once passed through his life. Mengxi is left speechless and tries to convince herself to remain humble, stay composed, and stop thinking so highly of herself. The system celebrates the host's epic departure and grants him an additional reward of 10,000 yuan. Afterward, Xingwang says goodbye, enters his new house, and closes the door. Mengxi then goes home and throws herself onto the sofa. A short while later, her phone begins vibrating. She answers and asks what Lele wants. On the other end, Lele says that she has some gossip. Mengxi tells her to speak quickly, and Lele comments that she is incredibly lucky because even her backup plan has turned out to be a gold mine. Mengxi does not understand, and Lele asks whether she knows the so-called brother Wang, who is constantly trending, the big spender who either praises or humiliates wealthy heirs on streaming platforms. Mengxi replies that she does not watch live streams, but Lele asks her to guess who he is. Tired of the game, Mengxi tells her friend to get to the point. Lele then reveals that the man is Xing Wang and estimates that his net worth is at least several billion. She says that Xing Wang pursued Mengxi for years and that she should abandon Ping Taihe and go after him because Taihe might not even inherit the family fortune, while Xing Wang already has billions in his hands. Mengxi asks how she can be certain that the user is Xing Wang. Lele explains that the user appears as brother in her contact list and that he was already saved among her contacts. In Lele's opinion, Xing Wang must come from an extraordinarily wealthy family that pretended to be poor in order to train him. And now the truth has finally been revealed. Upon hearing all of this, Mengxi is shocked. She realizes that Xing Wang loved her for 4 years while she ignored the man who could have given her a lifetime of luxury and wealth. Desperate, she begins screaming, unable to accept it. Afterward, Mengxi tries to pull herself together and tells herself that appearance does not matter in the end. She remembers the saying that it is easier for a woman to win over a man and believes that if she pursues him now, the love Xing Wang felt for 4 years will surely reignite. In her mind, if he remembers how he used to feel, everything can return to the way it was. After all, Mengxi still considers herself the most beautiful woman in the world. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Xing Wang thinks that his body still needs further improvement. He concludes that being wealthy but physically weak would be tragic, so he needs to exercise. The protagonist takes out his phone and begins searching for the best fitness trainers. He also considers building a home gym and hiring a personal trainer. After reviewing the options, Xing Wang chooses a trainer and decides to go with that one. Suddenly, while Xing Wang is at home, the system appears and announces that it has detected 2 women who feel extreme regret regarding him and that the requirements for an upgrade have been met. The protagonist realizes that the system has been upgraded. The system then announces that the regret plugin has been activated and explains that whenever someone's regret level reaches 90%, Xing Wang will receive 5 points that can be converted into intelligence, strength, or charisma. The list shows Chu Xinuo with a regret level of 50% and Lin Mengxi with 80%. Xing Wang is surprised that Mengxi's regret is already so high. Shortly afterward, the system displays the host's profile. Xing Wang, 24 years old, Scorpio, 1 meter and 78 centimeters tall, strength 25 out of 100, intelligence 45 out of 100, charisma 35 out of 100, and 0 available points, while reminding him that the maximum level for an ordinary person is 40. Since the plugin has just been activated, the system grants the host 5 points to add to strength, intelligence, or charisma. Without hesitation, Xing Wang decides to place all of them into strength. He thinks that the reward came at the perfect time, just as he was planning to begin training, and is pleased that he can increase his attributes for free. As soon as he applies the points, he feels the difference in his body and excitedly says that the change is truly noticeable. Even so, he soon remembers that the system should have activated earlier because he has already paid for 20 training sessions. However, since the money has already been spent, he concludes that he cannot let it go to waste. The protagonist then thinks that the renovations on his parents' house are already complete and that it is now time to begin adding furniture gradually, improving their lifestyle one step at a time. After looking through several options on his phone, he chooses something that looks good and decides to buy it. The next day, Xing Wang arrives at the E-Hour gym. The receptionist asks whether he is there to work out, and he explains that he purchased 20 sessions with a personal trainer through the app the previous day, under the name Xing Wang. She asks him to wait a moment while she checks. As he waits, the protagonist looks around and thinks that the gym seems good, fully equipped from one end to the other with nothing obviously wrong at first glance. The receptionist then finds the order but informs him that he needs to become a member before the training sessions can be activated. Xing Wang finds this strange and asks whether the membership and training are separate. She confirms this, explaining that there are monthly, semi-annual, and annual memberships, while personal training is covered by a separate contract with the trainer. Since he purchased 20 sessions, she recommends the monthly plan and adds that if he signs up immediately, he will receive 3 free sessions. Xing Wang notices the trick and thinks that he paid 80,000 yuan for premium training, yet the price did not even include the gym membership. In his opinion, gyms truly know how to squeeze money out of people. The receptionist asks whether he has made his decision, and the protagonist says yes. When she asks which membership he wants, Xing Wang says that he wants to cancel his private training sessions. The receptionist is surprised, and he explains that 20 sessions cost 80,000 yuan, So, if this were his business, the membership would be included for free. Unwilling to argue any further, the protagonist simply tells her to process the refund. The receptionist tries to explain that it is company policy and asks him to reconsider. But Xingwang says that he has already made his decision. She then informs him that refunds require the manager's approval. Xingwang tells her to call the manager. As he waits, he thinks that money needs to be spent wisely. If something were truly worthwhile, he would spend 100 million without blinking. But if he spent even a single yuan and was treated disrespectfully, then it would not be worth it. The system appears once again and says that the host's view of money in unfair situations is correct and that it admires him. Xingwang is surprised by yet another acknowledgement. At that moment, the manager appears and begins speaking to him, but quickly recognizes him as Xingwang. The protagonist also recognizes the man and asks whether the gym belongs to Wang Tairan. Wang Tairan tells the receptionist to return to work and says that he will handle the matter personally. This is Wang Tairan, 27 years old, a former high school classmate, and notorious wealthy playboy who, even 4 years after graduating, still returned to the school to flirt with younger girls, making him a complete idiot. Tairan comments that Xingwang signed up for 20 training sessions and says that it is quite a surprise. The protagonist replies that he wants to cancel them. Tairan mocks him by asking whether the cost was too much for his wallet. Xingwang responds by asking whether Tairan is the one refusing to issue the refund. Tairan says that it is only 80,000 yuan, nothing worth worrying about, and that he merely found Xingwang's face familiar and wanted to talk. He then mentions that Gao Yuan works there. He calls Yuan over and tells Xingwang that it has been a long time since he last saw Gao Yuan, adding that she even mentioned him the other day. The protagonist remains silent. Shortly afterward, Gao Yuan appears and asks what is going on, calling Tairan darling, but she is surprised when she sees Xingwang. As soon as Gao Yuan appears at the gym, the system chimes and announces that she has entered the Regret Development Program. The panel displays her information. Gao Yuan, 24 years old, 1 meter and 68 centimeters tall, 52 kilograms, attractiveness 8 out of 10, and a current regret level of 0%. Seeing this, Xingwang realizes that the time has come to earn some points. He understands that he needs to make Gao Yuan regret how she treated him in the past, which is perfect because he still remembers clearly how naive he used to be. Back in school, Gao Yuan pretended to care about him. When a girl gave him a love letter, she told him that it was only part of a bet and asked him not to become distracted. Xingwang, deeply in love, replied that he understood and would never fall for anyone else because she was the only person he liked. In another memory, Gao Yuan said that she was extremely stressed and thanked him for listening, claiming that he was a very good person and important to her. However, she soon let it slip that it would be perfect if she could always copy all of his homework. Xingwang realizes that he truly believed she had feelings for him when, in reality, she was merely taking advantage of him. He also remembers that Gao Yuan accepted gifts from several boys, while always repeating the same phrase. She would accept the gift but ask them not to think too much about it, because she did not want anyone to misunderstand. The protagonist concludes that impressing her with money might not work because her family is one of the wealthiest in the city. He then analyzes Wang Tairan, the man she is currently dating. Tairan has defined abs, a narrow waist, enormous muscles, and is a complete gym rat. Furthermore, he was a notorious bully in high school. Xingwang remembers his former classmates saying that Gao Yuan had been interested in Tairan for a long time because she had always been attracted to muscular men. The wealthy girl had even become a fitness trainer just to remain close to him. Xingwang understands that if he can surpass Wang Tairan in front of her, he might be able to change how Gao Yuan views both of them. In his opinion, girls like her are predictable. Gao Yuan asks whether there is a problem, and Xingwang decides that he needs to humiliate Wang Tairan in front of her and destroy the image she has of him. The protagonist complains that it is absurd to pay a separate membership fee after already purchasing 20 private training sessions. Wang Tairan replies that this is standard practice in the fitness industry and mocks him by saying that if Xingwang thinks it is too expensive, he should not hire a personal trainer and should simply work out alone. He also ridicules office workers, saying that they already get enough exercise from squeezing onto the subway every day. Xingwang replies that this hardly counts as exercise, but since Gao Yuan works there, he will purchase an annual membership to show his support. If he likes the gym, he will renew it later. Tairan mocks him, warning Xingwang not to pretend to be wealthy when he has no money, or sooner or later he will have to cut back on food, and training will be useless if he cannot afford to eat properly. Deep down, Tairan believes that Xingwang is still in love with Gao Yuan, but thinks that it is a shame because she belongs to him now. Pretending to be short on money, Xingwang asks whether his former schoolmate can give him a discount. Tyron finds this strange, but the protagonist insists, saying that he and Gao Yuan were classmates after all. He reasons that Tyron was not wealthy in school, yet Gao Yuan still chose him, meaning that she is not only interested in money. He also suspects that Gao Yuan probably helped Wang Tyron financially so that he could open such a large gym. Even though Xingwang could buy the entire gym, he decides to play the long game, like a predator pretending to be prey. Wanting to appear generous in front of Gao Yuan, Tyron says that for her sake, he will give Xingwang a 40% discount, something no one else has ever received. Since refunds are complicated, he also upgrades the package from 20 to 30 sessions. Even so, he mocks Xingwang by saying that he needs to work hard to avoid becoming a joke and that he hopes Xingwang can manage more than just a few repetitions. Xingwang accepts and says that he will not forget the favor, promising to repay him twice over someday. Deep down, however, he only thinks that Tyron talks far too much. Wang Tyron then calls Zhang Qi over and orders him to take care of Mr. Hong while he goes to exercise with Gao Yuan. Gao Yuan wishes Xingwang good luck, but privately feels sorry for him when she sees his gloomy face and thinks that it is a shame he's so thin. Zhang Qi asks whether Xingwang has trained before and which area he wants to focus on. The protagonist replies that he will not be training that day and says that they can discuss it another time because he has urgent matters to handle. Zhang Qi agrees, but as soon as Xingwang walks away, he begins mocking him, saying that there goes another man pretending to be tough, someone who only wants to post pictures online. The receptionist agrees with him. Xingwang hears them and feels satisfied, thinking that they can mock him as much as they like because it will only make his revenge even better. Once outside the gym, the protagonist asks the system to display his status. The system shows Xingwang, 24 years old, Scorpio, 1 meter and 79 centimeters tall, stamina 23 out of 100, intelligence 45 out of 100, charisma 35 out of 100, and 0 available points, while reminding him that the maximum level for an ordinary person is 40. Xingwang notices that he has grown 1 centimeter taller and concludes that increasing his stamina has additional effects. He wonders whether continuing to increase that attribute might make him even taller, and imagines an absurdly muscular version of himself. The system immediately interrupts his fantasy, telling him that he is overthinking it and that such a scenario will never happen. Even so, it adds that besides height, size will affect other things as well, so he does not need to worry too much. Xingwang suspects that the system just made a dirty joke, but he has no way to prove it. Afterward, he asks to see the statuses of Chu Xinuo and Lin Mengxi as well. The protagonist thinks that his stamina is currently 23 and that he needs only 17 more points to reach the maximum level of an ordinary person, so he decides to maximize that attribute first. Now, he only needs to decide whom to focus on. After analyzing their regret levels, Xingwang notices that Lin Mengxi needs only another 20% to reach the threshold. Curious to learn what reward he will receive when her regret reaches 100%, he makes his decision. His next target will be Lin Mengxi. Meanwhile, Mengxi tries to convince herself that she still has a chance. She thinks that without Ping Taihei, Xingwang is still an option, and since he sincerely fell in love with her once before, he can surely fall for her again. To prepare herself, she watches a tutorial on how to apply perfectly natural makeup, which explains that in the eyes of men, natural makeup looks like no makeup at all and therefore appears to be natural beauty, although the real secret is making sure the hair looks flawless. At that moment, her phone rings and Mengxi sees that Xingwang is calling. She becomes excited, thinking that the call has come at the perfect time, just as she was considering speaking to him. Mengxi believes that Xingwang must have already gotten over his anger because he liked her for 4 years, and she concludes that a man like him is easy to handle. In her opinion, all she needs to do is play along and show a few signs of submission, and any simp will fall in love with her again. Before she even answers, the system informs Xingwang that Lin Mengxi's regret level has increased by 1%. The protagonist notices that her regret rose before the call was even answered and finds it interesting, realizing that perhaps appearing too eager will not work. He concludes that Mengxi probably enjoys watching someone chase after her. Xingwang remembers that he originally fell for Mengxi because she resembled Gao Yuan, almost like love at first sight. However, he became so deeply involved that he nearly forgot Gao Yuan completely. Now, after years of being a simp, he realizes that he was never even her type. When Mengxi answers and asks whether he needs something, Xingwang says that it is nothing important but decides to test an idea. On the other end, she already begins imagining that he is falling in love with her again and might be about to ask her out. However, Xingwang merely asks whether she remembers the tissue he lent her to wipe away her tears and says that he wants it back. Mengxi is stunned and does not understand, but he hangs up immediately afterward. The system comments that the host has no sense of romance and ended the call far too quickly. Even so, it is shocked by how direct the call was and rewards Xingwang with 666 yuan out of pure respect. Mengxi stares at her phone in disbelief, wondering who the hell asks for a used tissue bag. However, she soon begins interpreting the situation differently, thinking that perhaps Xingwang simply wants to meet her, but is too embarrassed to ask directly. She convinces herself that only someone as strange as him would invent an excuse like that, remembering that he was already like this in college. She then begins to suspect that Xingwang might have some strange fetish involving things covered in her bodily fluids. Since she already threw the tissue away, Mengxi wonders whether replacing it with another one will work. In the end, she decides that it is only a piece of cloth with her bodily fluids on it anyway. At that moment, the system announces that Lin Mengxi's regret level has increased by another 1%. Xingwang compares it to simps becoming excited when their crush says she's going to take a shower, only in reverse, and concludes that simps always end up suffering. Later, at a cafe, Xingwang reflects that his recent influence-related tasks seem to revolve around women, while the amount of money he receives is decreasing. He suspects that there must be a limit and decides that he needs to raise the stakes by paying more attention to investments as well. In his opinion, investing and entrepreneurship offer many opportunities to gain influence. While searching on his phone, he finds information about lot number 7 at Christie's and discovers that the country is auctioning off a national treasure from the Western Zhou dynasty, a bronze vessel that is crucial for historical research. Xingwang concludes that it is time to do something meaningful. At that moment, Mengxi arrives and calls his name. When she sees him researching auctions, she thinks that it suits someone from an extremely wealthy family. She apologizes for making him wait, but Xingwang gets straight to the point and asks whether she thinks he has developed feelings for her again. He notices that she dressed far too formally just to return a tissue, saying that he can see her natural makeup and even the shine on her lips. He then asks whether she really needed to place the tissue inside a box. Mengxi becomes embarrassed and irritated, saying that he is exaggerating and that she only applied light makeup. The system announces that Lin Mengxi's regret level has increased by another 1%. Xingwang says that he can say things that are even harsher. He states that when he was poor, he was merely one of her simps, someone she could look down on. Now that he has become wealthy, she cannot resist throwing herself at him. The protagonist makes it clear that he will not become Mengxi's backup plan. She tries to defend herself, saying that she has not even said anything, and asking what he is implying. The system announces once again that her regret has increased by another 1%. Xingwang realizes that Mengxi truly seems to enjoy this kind of pressure because, although she appears angry, her regret level continues rising. He then ends the test with a cold apology for being rude. In the protagonist's opinion, the experiment was a success. Mengxi tries to defend herself, saying that Xingwang cannot think of her that way because she always dresses like this when going out. She then says that there are many ways to return a tissue and asks why he agreed to meet her if he never planned to change his mind. In her opinion, it would have been better for him to reject her outright. Xingwang replies that naturally he wanted to see her expression when she realized that her expectations had been crushed. He says that it was exactly what she used to do when she watched his expectations being destroyed. The protagonist then asks how Mengxi feels, saying that it was probably the first time she had experienced that sensation. But she did not need to worry because there would be a second and a third time. Furious, Mengxi says that he has gone too far. At that moment, the system repeatedly announces that Lin Mengxi's regret level has increased by 1%. Xingwang thinks that this is what a goddess is like in the end. Once her charm disappears, she is nothing. He then remembers how Mengxi used to talk about him in the past, treating him as nothing more than a simp. Back then, she said that if she had not needed to copy his homework, she would not even have looked at Xingwang. She also said that all she had to do was smile at him and show him a little kindness, and he would wag his tail all day while someone like him was not even worthy of carrying her shoes. Back in the present, Xingwang asks whether Mengxi regrets it now, and says that this is only the tip of the iceberg compared with what he endured before. The system then announces that Lin Mengxi's regret level has reached 99% and rewards the host with 5 points. Xingwang realizes that she is stuck at 99%, only 1% away from the maximum, but decides not to rush because he still has plenty of time. The system asks whether he wants to assign the points and offers the options of adding 5 points to stamina, intelligence, or charisma. Without hesitation, Xingwang places all of them into stamina. He immediately feels his power increasing and notices that the effect is instantaneous, as though he could run 10 kilometers without becoming tired. He thinks that it is now time to deal with Chu Xinuo, but first he decides to go to the gym and test the effects of those 5 points. The next day, Xingwang begins his first training session with Jiang Qi. When he sees the prepared weight, the protagonist says that it is not even 50 kilograms, so it is too light and more weight needs to be added. Zhang explains that this is his first session and that training should follow a gradual progression. Before increasing the weight, he needs to determine whether Xingwang's muscles can handle it in order to avoid injuries, since many people overestimate their own abilities. The protagonist notices the hidden insult and asks whether Zhang is trying to say that he is overestimating himself. Xingwang then remembers that the personal trainer is there precisely to keep him from getting injured and orders him to load 150 kilograms. Zhang is shocked and says that such a weight would be difficult even for him, and that normally only professional athletes or advanced lifters train that heavily. He tries to suggest something safer, but Xingwang interrupts and asks whether they should load 200 kilograms instead, saying that he only wants to try. Xingwang feels the prepared weight and confirms that, as expected, the added points have made it seem far too light. Meanwhile, Zhang becomes suspicious, thinking that the protagonist is playing with him and making him load all that weight merely for entertainment. Xingwang notices his hesitation and asks why he is still standing there, mocking him by asking whether he is afraid that Xingwang will lift more than his own trainer. Zhang asks whether he even understands what 200 kilograms means. Even so, he says that if Mr. Hang insists, he will not stop him, but first he needs him to sign a liability waiver, because if Xingwang injures himself through his own insistence, the gym will not be held responsible. Xingwang asks whether he is not exaggerating, but Zhang replies that it is not an exaggeration, only responsible procedure and a way to make him understand the weight of 200 kilograms. Deep down, the trainer becomes irritated, thinking that people who overestimate their own abilities only cause trouble and hopes that Xingwang can at least lift the bar off the rack. At that moment, Wang Tairan arrives and asks what is happening. Zhang explains that he wanted to start Mr. Hang gradually with only 5 kilograms, but Xingwang insists on trying 200 kilograms. Gao Yuan also tries to intervene, telling Xingwang that Zhang is only trying to protect him. However, the protagonist proposes a bet. If he succeeds in lifting the weight, Zhang will pay for his membership and personal training. If he fails, Xingwang will purchase 100 training sessions from him. Zhang tries to say that the client's health is more important and that nothing else matters, but privately doubts that someone who bargained over the membership fee would pay for 100 sessions. Xingwang then offers to pay for all 100 sessions in advance, and says that if he wins, they can simply refund the money. Gao Yuan becomes worried, thinking that with such a weak-looking body, Xingwang is seriously trying to bet against Zhang and suggests that he first attempt half the weight by starting with 100 kilograms. However, Xingwang ignores her and asks whether the trainer is willing to accept the bet. Seeing that he insists, Zhang agrees. Even so, he recommends that Mr. Hang first try merely lifting the bar from the rack. According to him, if Xingwang cannot do that, they can end the bet immediately without anyone getting hurt. Deep down, Zhang mocks him, thinking that Xingwang is being stubborn despite clearly lacking the ability, and decides that if he truly succeeds, he will accept his defeat. Xingwang positions himself on the bench and begins the movement. At first, Zhang thinks that the bar has not moved at all and is already about to stop him, but the protagonist simply lifts it. This leaves Zhang in disbelief. The protagonist begins counting the repetitions and reaches 5, while the trainer remains completely stunned and silently feels grateful that he did not say anything too insulting earlier. Gao Yuan watches the scene in disbelief, thinking that Xingwang truly managed to perform the exercise with so much weight. In her opinion, not even Tyron could lift 200 kilograms like that, and the most absurd part is that Xingwang is much thinner than him. Unable to understand what is happening, she begins questioning the image she had of him. After finishing, Xingwang stands up and demands the refund, saying that the total is 85,000 yuan and ordering them to transfer the money to his account. He then says that he will return to train in a few days, but asks them to find him a trainer with actual ability, because making such a fuss over 200 kilograms will only damage the gym's reputation. At that moment, his phone rings, displaying an incoming call from Chu Xinuo. Xingwang says that he will leave first, because he has a date with a beautiful woman and cannot keep her waiting. Upon hearing this, Gao Yuan feels irritated and thinks that the loser actually has a girlfriend, and an extremely beautiful one at that. Inside the restaurant, Chu Xinuo thanks Brother Hong for helping her despite the problems they had in the past. She says that there is no way she can repay him properly, so she can only treat him to dinner to express her gratitude. Xingwang responds with only a cold, Xinuo cannot tell whether he is truly indifferent or merely pretending, but she remembers that he rejected her the last time, whereas this time, he agreed to meet her. Because of that, she begins to think that she might still have a chance. She then mentions that Meow Group is in trouble. After the last PK competition, the company lost many of its major supporters, and the income of its top streamers fell to less than one-tenth of what it had been before. Zinuo also says that he, Shui, throws a tantrum at the company every day, and that the company has now increased its commission rates. Deep down, she remembers that they use every possible excuse to reduce the streamer's earnings, and that some people who generate 100,000 yuan per month end up receiving less than 3,000 after all the deductions. Xingwang asks whether the situation is truly that difficult. Jinuo confirms it and explains that the company is forcing the streamers to sign new contracts so it can impose even heavier fees and recover its money. She says that the golden years in that industry do not last long and that she truly cannot survive that way anymore. Because of that, she tried to find another path but ended up encountering that bastard Zhang Wencheng. Once again, Jinuo thanks Xingwang for helping her that day, saying that she does not know what she would have done without him. The protagonist listens to everything but thinks that no matter how sincere she seems now, this kind of gratitude is worthless. If he were still the old Xingwang and had helped her purely out of kindness, he would not have received genuine gratitude and would merely have been treated as another obedient simp. Even so, he understands that dealing with people like Zinuo is simple. All he has to do is give her false hope, make her believe she has a chance, and snatch that hope away at the final moment. That way, she would become anxious and torment herself, while watching everyone else receive opportunities except her. Only then would she realize that her own arrogance had cost her that hope. With this in mind, Xingwang says that it was nothing, and explains that he actually came because he needs her help with something. Xinuo immediately becomes excited and says that she will help if she can. Xingwang explains that the current number of streamers signed by Dujin is far below his target. The company has promising prospects, but many of them lack experience, so he needs skilled streamers to help guide the newcomers. He begins to say that he thinks Xinuo might be suitable for the role, but his sentence is interrupted by a phone call. Xingwang answers it, asks the caller to wait a moment, and then tells Zinuo that something urgent has come up and that they can continue the conversation later. As she watches him leave, Zinuo becomes fixated on the unfinished sentence, thinking that he had practically said she met the standards he needed. In her mind, he could only have been referring to her, because who else could it be? Shortly afterward, a message from Zhang Qingting appears, celebrating that her luck has finally arrived. She says that she never imagined she would find such a wonderful boss because she originally only wanted to follow Sister Hao in search of a few benefits, but she never expected to receive such special treatment from the boss. Qingting even wonders whether she saved the world in a previous life and promises to work hard and earn money for the boss. Haoman replies with only, "Good." Upon seeing this, the system announces that Chu Xinuo's regret level has increased by 5%. Xingwang smiles, thinking that everything is in the palm of his hand. Later, at Chu Xinuo's house, she cannot stop thinking about Zhang Qingting. If even someone at her level with an average monthly income of around 2 million yuan was confident enough to leave and join Dujin, then with Jinuo's own abilities, she could only be next. Jinuo begins lamenting that if she had built a better relationship with Xingwang before, her status at Dujin might now be similar to Gao Wen's. She wonders where she went wrong to end up being compared with Zhang Qingting. Even so, she tries to comfort herself by saying that she's still younger than Gao Wen and still has many opportunities. The next day at the Meow Group media building, the streamers notice Sinuo arriving and begin moving away from her, whispering that she has arrived. Confused, she asks what is going on. The company's boss then calls her over in an authoritative tone. He says that he will explain the situation. Because she seduced an investor and became involved with the investor's partner, the investors became furious and now want to withdraw their money. Therefore, according to him, Chu Xinuo must bear the consequences. Chu Xinuo tries to defend herself, saying that she is also a victim because Zhang Wencheng was someone the company repeatedly encouraged her to approach. However, the boss does not care and replies that he is not interested in the process, only the result. Even so, he says that he will not force her to cover the entire loss. Since she does not have that kind of money, she only needs to agree to pay the termination fee for her own contract. Zinuo is shocked, but the boss asks whether he needs to repeat himself and warns that if she cannot cover the costs, she should prepare to be sued. Unable to understand what is happening to everyone there, Zinuo sees several other employees leaving the company and asks why. One of them replies that they are obviously resigning. In fact, they are all going to Dujin. According to her, compared with joining Dujin, the termination fee is nothing. The employee explains that she has a friend who joined the first group of streamers recruited by Dujin, and in only 1 month, she managed to buy an apartment in the city center with the money she earned from streaming. She also says that the boss there is extremely generous, invests heavily to improve the streamers' rankings, and distributes the revenue using normal commission rates, unlike Meow Group, which even counts the platform's share as part of the streamer's operating expenses. After hearing all of this, Zinuo realizes that Meow Group is sinking and wonders whether she truly wants to sync with it. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content. Thank you.